Can any folks hear us on the call? Can I get an audio test, please?
I hear you, Mr. Jones.
Okay, you can hear me okay? Let's see if you can hear me from the room. I'm going to go into the room. If you could let me know.
Mr. Jones, if you're talking, I don't hear anything.
Same here. This is Rhonda. I'm not hearing anything.
I was excited to be at Orange High School this morning, greeting students, and it was so calm and pleasant, and I saw almost 100% mask compliance of students coming in outside, waiting for things to open. It just really was encouraging to me that we can do this with everyone's full participation in our protective health measures, and I just know there are a lot of excited kids ready to get back to school.
Thank you, Ms. Doyle. Dr. Moore?
Hello.
I just wanted to give a shout out to Dr. Feller and Dr. Dawson for the awesome Summer Scholars Academy. I wasn't here at the first meeting this year, and I just wanted to make sure that I said
And I also wanted to mention how grateful I am that Orange County Schools stood up a virtual academy this year in the state and every other district. And I am just really grateful that most everyone who wanted to participate in that was able to. And I think that it was a lot of good planning and foresight to make sure we had that option this fall. So thank you, Dr. Dawson, and all of staff who worked hard on that. And I will leave it at that. Do we have Dr. Moore on the line now?
She's on WebEx.
Perfect. Dr. Moore, do you have comment tonight?
Yes, can you hear me?
Somewhat. Can we try it one more time?
Sure, okay. On August 11th, I attended Governor Cooper's.
Dr. Moore, we can't hear you.
Okay, never mind, sorry.
Yeah. Try that.
Bear with us, everyone. This is why we are so glad we are not hybrid teaching this year.
All right, Dr. Moore, can you try again?
Sure. Can you hear me now?
I think it's improved.
It is improved.
Try again.
Try again. Try again.
Can you hear me?
Issue. You can say on your video.
Dr. Moore, could you try disabling your video?
It is disabled.
Moore, is that any better?
Dr. Moore, can you try?
Yes, I'm here.
Is that
We're
better?
ready for you. Dr. Moore?
Yes, can you hear me?
Can.
Okay. Sorry. August 11th, I virtually attended Governor Cooper's Office of Public Engagement and Inclusion Town Hall. It focused on equity and the Drive Task Force, a sound basic education, and scholarship opportunities for our students.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Does that complete your comment?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Moore. And now, is Mr. Jones coming back for public comment from the public, or should we? I'm going to call a 5-minute recess.
Okay.
I don't know what we just need.
Maybe not with WebEx, but
Yeah, that's the issue is getting to figure out how to turn off the- I mean, I think the audio would be better.
yeah.
I just probably have to practice before going live.
Right.
Yeah, right. Was it like trying to?
I'm like running.
You've got the TV running. And it's still recording.
It happens. We're not exposed.
All this. Seems like.
Take every opportunity. But now I brought everybody.
I'll just go with the phone meeting. So we're still getting jaggedy audio here?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. We take this laptop and we get Ethernet with it versus Wi-Fi.
I don't know if I have a long Wi-Fi cable.
There, you can't leave.
You know that they're trying to get the public comment.
Is that where we are now?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to make sure we took a recess. I just didn't want you to get surprised. Okay, thank you.
I'll just call the meeting back whenever we've got public comment ready to go, if we're able to do it. Otherwise, I don't know how we navigate that.
Any in person?
Yeah, it's like
There's
these are
speakers.
here. What kind of job is it? How do you have to Yeah, 1 minute. Here's right here. Then you go straight Ethernet right into it. And you're not dealing with Wi-Fi. Oh. Here, let's just try to see if this is activated on the port.
I think that's like
That's
a-
R45 on there.
yeah.
Sorry.
Not gonna reach. So we can move the owl, but then we can't lose any of the,
Closet sitting in there. No. I've always worried about this.
Yeah.
Was there.
Yeah. I was thinking.
You got your back, Hillary.
Yeah, right. I thought it was something when we had Bonnie in the box.
I know, it's really hard to put me in a box. It's not.
Time on August 9th, 2021, let it know.
We are on.
You mentioned all the way.
God, I've been reading so much lately. Well, I didn't know. But what I'm reading right now is, no one can save us. It's
You can use this report to see if phone was in a second.
Yeah. From there, it's not.
what is going on to read like that? Yeah, let's say that they're like.
This table has to get this one back.
Hold on one sec.
That's what we talked about when we were bringing our staff. That's why we were. It's all through. Seventh grade and
Dr. Moore, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Well, we got plenty of food here, but it's saving.
We can hear her, but she's very scratchy. Maybe if she, Dr. Moore, can you try leaving the meeting and joining again real quick? That might help the audio.
Okay.
If you can connect to another panelist, we have about 6 in the room.
Sorry?
We have more panelists, see if we get another panelist.
Uh-huh.
This is Shannon Braxton, Mr. Jones. Can you hear me? This is Shannon Braxton. Can you hear me, Todd?
You sound pretty bad, Shannon.
Are they presenting like that? Is there folks presenting that way?
Most are here to present, but there are some as panelists that may be called on. Does it have anything to do with the microphone? Okay. Yeah, then if you have to turn off the sound.
No, we're not attached. I think maybe a meeting owl issue. Yeah, Shannon, can you talk again for us?
Can you hear me?
Still a little broken up, thanks.
Do the staff that are here so that we can.
Here's my recommendation. We can connect this through audio so you won't have any of the video.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
I think.
So go ahead and do that, Patrick.
So this is going back together then?
We'll be using WebEx.
And we'll be able to unmute speakers.
I'll be able to do that from the host panel. My fingers are too good. Go back to that. Welcome.
Okay. So, that's you. We're just gonna move on without her. And,
I think I got the PowerPoint file.
you able to unmute public speakers now?
Let me get this going so you can hear them.
Oh, it's not bad. Okay.
Welcome to WebEx. Enter your attendee ID number.
Dr. Moore, can you hear us now?
Dr. Moore is not 100%.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, are you staying on, Dr. Moore?
If y'all can hear me, if not, then I just need to.
I think we can hear you well enough. Great.
Be right back in 5 minutes, bro. Hang out for a little bit, I can. I probably don't want my microphone.
Okay, are you able to unmute for public comment right now? Because that's where we're at. Okay, Laura Streitfeld is the first public speaker. Now is the time for public comment. After each speaker has been recognized and unmuted, they will have 3 minutes to speak, or we will not have a discussion with the speaker. No cursing or vulgar language will be permitted or personal abuse against any person. Public comments should not address any specific confidential student or personnel matter. Complaints concerning any specific employee or student are not permissible during public comment. Start your timer once we connect.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I wanted to comment on a couple of things. School began today in our district, but the district did not appear ready to fulfill the COVID plans that were voted on by the board. Perhaps it was an impossible timeline, similar to when parents were asked to commit by August 1st to enroll in the virtual learning. Calls were not underway. As of today, employees were not told where to go or where to go for required screening tests for COVID-19. Neither were students. No data onto their COVID test for employees or student groups was shared.
If there's any.
Should I stop?
You have your microphone on, if you will mute, please.
Should I pause?
Yes, please pause. I promise we'll start your time over.
Try now.
Ms. Streitfeld, will you try again, please? I'll start your time over.
Start again?
Yes, please.
Okay, I'm hearing an echo. I don't know if you all.
I'm sorry. I don't. Should we just send, I don't, what do y'all think?
Have it submitted in writing and included in the minutes. I should be able to meet everyone now.
Mr. Jones, can you please mute everyone aside from Ms. Streitfeld?
I'm sorry?
I'm trying to communicate with our technology.
She didn't.
Oh,
Should I try again?
yes, I think that you're good now. Your time will start now. I'm so sorry, Ms. Streitfeld.
Thank you. School began today, but the district did not appear to fulfill the COVID plans that were voted on by the board. Perhaps it was an impossible timeline, similar to asking parents to commit by August 1st to enroll in virtual learning when school protocols were not yet underway. As of today, Orange County school employees had not been told where or when to go for required screening tests. Neither were students in particular groups that were required to be tested. No data was asked for about employee or student groups' vaccine status, which was supposed to be requested and submitted. There was no data, and there was reported non-compliance with masking. The testing that will take place that was announced in today's agenda seems to begin with bus drivers and substitute teachers. Parents, staff, and public officials need accurate and transparent data to assess their risks and find solutions for themselves, their families, and the wider community, as well as the students in the building. COVID is airborne. It's in the air. We know that now. Scientists have known that since 2020, and the CDC and the WHO have confirmed that. The aerosols that spread COVID float. Droplets drop and leave the air, but aerosols float for hours on end in an indoor space where people are breathing. So the knowing that COVID is airborne, now with the Delta variant, The protocols that worked last year are no longer applicable. Last year, the guidance was that it took 15 minutes of close contact to be exposed to the virus. With the Delta variant, it can be transmitted in 1 second, according to infectious disease experts at UNC and across the country. Basing our district's lunch policy on heat index numbers and a 15-minute period is extremely risky for students and staff, particularly when none have been screened for COVID-19 as of today, the first day of school. Today, while Chapel Hill and Carrboro City School students ate outdoors 10 miles up the road, Orange County students and teachers sat indoors unmasked. In Chapel Hill and Carrboro City Schools, the priority is to eat outdoors, and the decision of when to eat indoors is left to the discretion of school principals. Spending 15 minutes in the heat or the cold appears far less risky than sharing indoor air. And while I applaud you all for pursuing the opportunity to have tents and other structures, those discussions were going on last year, and it feels rather late to be just catching up with policies to keep children and teachers safe by eating together outdoors rather than indoors. I'm concerned with how students, families, teachers, and staff are getting information. We're counting on the district to serve everyone with full and proactive access to information. We should not have to be public records experts or guess which questions to ask to learn when policies have not been implemented, or when there are cases in a building, or when there are test results. Please explain the legal authority for not releasing reporting data on the numbers of cases in schools when you plan to do screening tests of asymptomatic individuals. When the data is in, please share it widely. We all deserve to know. The board and the district need to let us know, and we all deserve to know so that we can make informed decisions. Last week and the week before, your experts talked about early detection as well as mitigation. Pardon me?
Your time is up, so I'll just ask you to wrap up, please.
Okay, I will wrap up. In terms of early detection, you all know that you're working on a testing plan. We requested since last March that you come up with a testing plan and start it in the spring as a pilot and have it fully ready for this fall. That didn't happen. Please look at Los Angeles Unified School District in Baltimore for an excellent model of how to stop cases before they spread, how to start from zero with zero cases in the building, and how to save lives by detecting COVID early as well as mitigating in the schools. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Drexel. Have a good night. Our next speaker is Nan Bolter.
All right, doing a sound check.
We've got you. Your time starts now. Welcome.
Thank you. My comment today is regarding agenda item on for the budget. I think it's item H5. And I wanted to talk about the budgetary responsibility of the state legislature and how it relates to our district. This is connected to the court case of Leandro versus State of North Carolina, a case that's been going on for 27 years and it's still unresolved. The state Supreme Court ruled in 1997 and 2004 that the state constitution calls for a minimum standard of education and that some students were not being provided with that standard and still are not. The court ordered the state to comply with sufficient funding and programming to meet the standard, but that has not happened. In June of this year, the court approved the Leandro Comprehensive Remedial Plan, a schedule of policies to be adopted by the state legislature over an 8-year period. The Leandro Plan would have repercussions for every district in terms of funding and policy. I mentioned to the board some proposed changes to the state finance system that could provide districts with more stability so you can engage in multi-year planning, more flexibility to put resources where you think it's best for students, and hopefully it means an end to the state budget's adjustments that happen after the school year begins. In planning for the impact of the Leandro Plan, I wanted to share a budget calculator that was developed by the advocacy organization Every Child NC, and that's on the web, everychildnc.org. It shows values for planning this planning year and for 2028 with all the various allotment categories and number of positions. This calculator shows what it would look like with full implementation of the Leandro Plan So far, legislators are not even close with their latest budget proposal, despite their obligation to the Constitution, the court, and the children of North Carolina. Whatever the fraction of the plan is enacted, the school board will be responsible for ensuring these additional resources are equitably distributed across schools and are used in ways that are aligned with student needs. I hope this board will honor their role in the Leandro mandate in the spirit of righting wrongs and improving equity. The school board can take action to adopt a resolution to show their commitment to the Leandro plan. I bring this issue to the board, but also to the Orange County school community, since the Leandro case is not common knowledge, even though it's been around and promises to be the most important reform our system has ever seen. Over at the General Assembly, the legislature doesn't even speak the word Leandro, something out of Harry Potter, the plan that must not be named. That way they can keep ignoring it for another 20 years. Even though the court says the plan has to be funded no matter the economic condition of the state. So I hear my timer's up. It's up to us parents to speak up about Leandro before another generation of children is cheated out of what they're owed, adequate funding from the state, and fair access to educational opportunity. Thank you for those extra seconds.
Thank you so much, Ms. Bolter. Have a good one. This concludes public comments for this evening. The next item on our agenda is the consent agenda. I know there are several items to pull. I know that the minutes are being requested to pull from me and Ms. Doyle. Maybe others have questions about them too. Mr. Atherton requested the final budget approval and the strategic plan, and Ms. Smiley requested purchasing orders for furniture and tents. So do I have a motion to approve the remaining items on the consent agenda, and then we will come to those items?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Second. A motion from Ms. Stevens, a second from Ms. Smiley. Mr. Atherton?
Yes.
Ms. Doyle? Yes. Ms. Howard? Yes. I vote yes. Dr. Moore?
Yes.
Yes. Ms. Smiley? Yes. Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Okay. The rest of the consent agenda has been approved, and next we will go to minutes. The only thing for me is that I wasn't at the last meeting, so I'm not going to vote on those, and I will pass it to Ms. Doyle to kick us off.
I think there's a correction already that I discussed with Wellington, but there also was a reference to 3 school remeetings instead of 2 school remeetings. Does anyone else have any edits to the minutes?
Mr. Atherton?
Yes, in section G, I had requested to pull the minutes because of the RFP and contract were not attached. And then the motion, it says adopted upon successful approval of the contract. We actually said upon attorney completing the review of the contract. So that approval was really the attorney review. So those would be my corrections to the minutes.
Any other corrections?
Well, I want to correction. I'd like to put the adjournment time on the minutes, please.
Okay, so with those corrections, should we bring them back at the next meeting to approve them?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Wellington, do you have everything you need to update this? Okay, awesome. Thank you. We will bring this back next time. The next item is the final budget approval. Mr. Atherton.
Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I have several questions, and I'll just go in order. So the first one is for the AIG teachers. I just wanted to confirm first that that will allow us to have a AIG teacher at each elementary.
It will allow us to have an AIG at each elementary, as well as an additional AIG teacher to ensure equity with regards to meeting the needs of all adults.
And the second question I have on that is the AIG assignment to the school will be 100% for that school. It's not going to be like 40, 20. Okay, excellent. The next one I have is the equity facilitator from the equity budget. Can you tell us what the equity budget is?
Yes, it's roughly $135,000 in total.
Okay, and we have not received the equity audit, which we had thought as part of our next steps in equity. Do we know when we are actually going to get that audit back?
I do know that it's in process. I don't know a finalization date at this time.
Okay. And reducing the 135 from the 71, do we know what programs will be impacted by doing that?
Sorry, I can't.
It's okay. It's okay.
It's okay.
So reducing your budget with the equity facilitator, do we know what will be impacted by doing that?
So it's hard to say. This year we're pushing heavily into schools. Some of like the work that we're trying to do is to like be part of like an equity cohort with the Superintendent Association. Just making sure that the schools, I thought about having like a grant for the schools to do some equity work, but it's our first year not being in COVID and pushing in. And so I don't really know all of the things that I would need the budget for, so it's a little bit hard for me to say that part. So.
I could add that, some of the professional development that we thought some of this budget would be needed for, we are able to engage without having any cost attached to it, i.e. to ITRA.
Okay. Thank you. The next question I had is on the overall budget. If we looked at what we are making reoccurring, we have some that are ESSER, some that we're doing from fund balance. What would be the amount that would be required for us to request from the county to maintain that?
So when we look at what we are requesting for fund balance appropriations that would be recurring, it is roughly $94 per pupil.
Okay.
And of course, that's not factoring in any of the salary increases at this time.
Do you know about what it would be if we did?
The salary increases, if we factored that in, I believe it would roughly be around $134 per pupil at the $800,000 salary and benefit increases based upon the Senate budget.
Okay, thank you. The last question I have is, I guess really for you, Mr. Abilene, is I had sent an email in and I copied the board about a program that the district used to have, which was more of a internship for allowing students to work in with the athletic directors or maintenance and over the summer doing painting or setting doors and things like that. And I just wanted to get some feedback on that, on what your thoughts are around that kind of program. The other part was moving forward with CTE in the sense of we have a lot of concentrator classes that are teaching kids some technical skills. We have, help desk, we have computers that need to be wiped and released every year, and trying to figure out a plan around doing that. So any thoughts around that? I know I sent it a little while back and I didn't hear anything, so I was just curious.
No, I think you've got some great questions. I mean, certainly we want to engage our students the best that we can, especially with job shadowing or other experiences while they're in school. Some of them might be able to help us with some technology.
Definitely.
So, we've got opportunities within our buildings, within our schools, certainly in the maintenance department. I know several years ago we talked about how difficult it was in some of our trade areas to recruit students, but to get them excited about whether it's engineering projects or capital projects we're working on to understand construction, and maybe they have an interest to go into the construction trades. We do have solar projects in the district, and to give them some experiences within our buildings, crunching energy data and seeing exactly from an operational side, what it takes to run a school or a building, especially if they're interested in solar or green projects as they venture on. But certainly, we relish the opportunity to extend what we do from operations to our curriculum and instructional settings, and so we'd certainly be in favor of that. I think what changed several years ago, and this is a while back, was there were certain rules and requirements with painting in schools and doing any window work or things where there may be lead or hazardous materials, and OSHA regulations around students and what kind of work they were able to do. So certainly we can move away from those type of projects, but I think with our warehouse, tremendous amount of picnic tables are being put together right now.
Exactly.
So, that's a project they can help with, and storing PPE and deliveries, and but absolutely, we think partnerships with our students would be an excellent win-win for the district.
About how much do you think would be needed to have some kind of?
I would need to get back to you on a cost estimate because I don't know child labor laws or the requirements of what we're able to pay students and what that would look like as far as the number of hours, et cetera. So I think we'd be able to research that and bring back to the board what types of activities they've been involved with, the number of hours they would be allowed to participate, and what any compensation may be for them.
Okay, that's fair. I just didn't want to not have that conversation, and definitely, I know we're all excited about seeing our students engage and do more. So that's all the questions I have, unless anybody else has questions.
I just have a question of why this is coming to us now, and how far is the state budget from being approved, and why are we waiting for the state budget to be approved?
Sure, that's a great question. Let me stand up here. Follow protocol. So right now, we are operating on a continuation budget, which is based upon what our funding was for the previous year. And our current budget that is before you, the fund balance appropriations that are included there, as well as any of the additional positions, without approval of that, we can't move forward. We're unable to move forward with any of that without an approved budget. So typically, the way that it would work is that we would approve a budget that would be a baseline budget based upon what we know at this time. Whenever the state passes a budget, which we're very hopeful that we will have that this year, then we would amend our budget at that time through the budget amendment process to adjust our budget to reflect any of those increases and or decreases that may be a result of that. Not anticipating decreases because the state budget that we have right now from our initial planning numbers is based upon our ADM as a reduction, as well as the reductions that they may be anticipating. I feel and very hopeful that they will hold districts harmless for any ADM reductions, so that would then result in us getting an increase from the state as a result of that.
So you took the more conservative route?
Yes.
So it's only up from here?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Ross.
Yes.
I'm going to suggest that we approve all of these at the end of the discussion, so I'm going to move into strategic plan unless there is anything else about the budget. Okay, Ms. Rotherton?
All right, so on the strategic plan, I have gotten a lot of feedback from the community, and I know there's some confusion around this, so this is more of a clarity question moving to making sure in our metrics we can address it. When we talk about the district's 4 priorities, the first one we talk about is literacy, and one of the feedback I get is, well, what about mathematics? And I realize that, there's language literacy, there's math literacy, there's all of these different aspects, and I think some of the community is feeling like that's really reading and writing versus all of those together. And I just wanted to first confirm that. And then the second part is your thoughts on how we're going to get to some SMART goals around that. And I know that's next steps.
Right. Thank you for that question, Mr. Atherton. And so, as we know, the district's former strategic plan sunsetted in 2020. Per analysis of data, so we were without and continue to be without an official strategic plan. We're working on the new strategic plan. But our data analysis certainly indicated that there were 4 priorities that the district needed to focus on, one of which is literacy. And just as you said, literacy is foundational. Literacy cuts across every single content area, right? So it's not just about reading or English language arts. Literacy is reading, writing, listening, speaking, and thinking critically across all content areas. And so we want students to be literate in every content area. We also know that 85% of content is taught through literacy. And so we have the 4 priorities, and now we are in the throes of developing the strategic plan and have identified 4 goals. What we wanted to do is show how the 4 priorities are subsumed in the 4 goals. And so in that first goal, teaching tomorrow's leaders, through a multi-tiered system of support, all learners will have access to and benefit from rigorous curriculum instruction that is research, evidence-based, and prepare them for college and career. That's not just talking about ELA, it's in math, science, social studies, all the core areas. And so, but math in particular, since you brought up math, will certainly be evident in the plans that schools, the goal setting that schools are going to be required to do, and that's been shared with them. So they will have a very specific math goal.
Excellent. I look forward to seeing the next steps.
Great. Okay. Ms. Hauser, and then Ms. Smiley. Yeah, I mean, my question was just following up on Mr. Atherton's question, which is when will we, I know that these are goals, and we talked about, these aren't quantitative goals, so when are we going to be seeing the quantitative?
Right. So after the goal setting, so we identified a mission, vision, belief statements, and these 4 goals. So once those are approved, the next phase of the work is to identify the objectives, the action items, and the measures for each goal.
Great. And what is the timeline?
So the timeline, we're hoping by late fall at the latest. That work is in process. We've begun some cursory work around that, and so we're looking at late fall. We're working diligently towards that. Goal teams have been formed, and so yeah, it's how it will be this school year.
So I'm just a little confused as to why you're asking what you're asking us to approve. My experience is that strategic planning is an iterative process. It's not a step-by-step process. So, and being a new board member and having found myself here before, I don't want to approve something and then you want to change it and you can't because the board approved it. So my inclination would be to just keep going. Why do you need us? What I don't want to be here is that you all approved this and now we can't change it.
No, I appreciate that question, Ms. Hauser. And so what we're asking the board to approve tonight are the mission, vision, belief statements, and the 4 goals. What may change throughout this 5-year strategic plan are the outcomes, the action items, and the measures. So, for example, if we achieve one of the objectives, then that would be one that, we would not continue to have as part of our strategic plan. We would have achieved that, and so the data may show other objectives that would be needed. And so that's where the flexibility comes in. But with regards to the mission, vision, beliefs, and the 4 goals, those are the parts of the plan that would stay and remain intact for the 5 years.
Sorry, just one final reaction, which is I had thought when we talked about this back in April or whenever that we would be going into the school year with sort of the quantitative goals we were aiming for already defined or very close to the start of the school year, maybe by September. And so if that isn't the case, I would find it very helpful for us to be clear about what are our measurable, observable goals for student outcomes for this school year, in terms of things like reading outcomes and things like that. I think understanding what kind of progress we're aiming to achieve in this school year would be really helpful. Okay, the next item that was pulled from consent is contracts for furniture, tent, outdoor learning purchase order. Ms. Smiley, yes, thank you. Very briefly on this one. First of all, I'm very appreciative that we're exploring all of this, and think it's really important. I noticed that part of this was asking for permission to use the state contracted vendors, and then within those that all agencies shall give preference to Correction Enterprises products when purchasing furniture. And so, in an earlier meeting, we had pulled and decided not to go with Correction Enterprises, given they use incarcerated labor, and it is just a few dollars a day. I have a request that we look at policy and whether we should have something in policy about that. But I was just hoping that you could speak, Mr. Abley, to the possibility of using Correction Enterprises.
Yeah, I'll provide a little bit of clarification, and obviously the board attorney may want to provide any additional comments as well. This is a state contract. The state goes through the formal processes to award certain state contracts to different entities or vendors. In this case, for furniture, there's a number of classes that furniture falls in. For instance, the table you're sitting at tonight is a class of furniture. Actual furniture for individual classroom, chairs, desks, that's a class of furniture, filing cabinet, office. Furniture, that's a class of furniture all the way down to tables in lunchrooms, etc. So there's multiple vendors that are available for soliciting quotes for furniture based on the needs of the school district. The second thing I'd mention is the state contracts for state agencies are required. For a local education agency school district, it is available and it is an option to use the state contract, but we're not bound by the state contract to utilize them. It's just assisting us with the processes for which we solicit vendors, whether we utilize vendors based on this pricing negotiated that are there. So for instance, when we say we need 200 classroom desks, and we know pretty much what that discounted percentage will be by these vendors. And so there's a multiple amounts of vendors. I haven't looked at the most recent list of classroom furniture per se. There's probably 15 to 20 vendors just in North Carolina alone, and we're not bound to use Correction Enterprises. We've got the flexibility, because we're not a state agency, that we can select the vendors that we ask to give us quotes on products.
Yes, so the use of the state term contract is an exception to the requirement that these things be bid. And the idea is that if the vendor will give you the same price and terms that it has agreed to, that it has negotiated with the state, then that there's an assumption that that's a decent deal and you don't have to put it out for bid. And so, but Mr. Abley is right. It's the preference that must be given to Correction Enterprises applies to state departments and institutions and state agencies. Okay. So this would not, we would have a separate contract with the vendor, but the idea is that we can piggyback on the bidding that the state has already done.
Okay, great, thank you. This does not necessarily mean that we would be using them.
That's correct. Really what it does, and the reason we go this route, as your attorney pointed out, it speeds up the process, especially now because we know it's already there, we know that process has already taken place. It helps us secure the quotes or bids for products much quicker than we would have been able to do it had we started the process with our own bid advertising.
Okay, great. I know that time is of the essence with this, so I'm certainly not looking to slow anything down. I just wanted to pull this as we have had that previous conversation, understand it a little bit more, and then request that policy committee maybe look at our contracting.
Very good. Thank you so much, Mr. Adderley, Ms. Gibson. Is any further discussion?
I do have a question, and I'm so sorry. It's the budget question, and the equity facilitator that is noted here, there's an equity facilitator that is position that's been on Orange County School Jobs Board for some weeks now. So is that the same? And so why are we voting on it if we're already advertising for the position?
It's budget pending.
Excuse me?
It's budget pending. Is there a motion to approve the final budget, the strategic plan, and the contract for furniture?
So moved.
Second. I have a motion for Ms. Smiley, a second for Ms. Doyle. Hauser? Yes. I vote yes. Dr. Moore?
Yes.
Ms. Smiley? Yes. Ms. Stevens?
You're lumping them all together?
Yes.
Okay. I don't support the facilitation, but I'll go on.
Mr. Atkinson?
Yes.
Ms. Doyle? Yes. Okay, we are through our consent agenda. With that, we will move to our first information item, which is opening of schools.
Yes, so our agenda items, the first one we wanted to speak to is convocation.
Okay.
And so last Wednesday, August 18th, was a great day of professional development in the district and a great way to start the school year right. Ms. Karen Chenoweth, published author and writer in residence with the Education Trust, was the keynote speaker for Wednesday afternoon convocation. In the morning, we kicked off the morning with opening remarks from our very own chair, Mrs. McKenzie, and then staff explored their why. Why do they do what they do? And what they are looking most forward to in this school year. We made concerted efforts to provide equity in education for all students in our county schools. After a powerful presentation on social emotional learning, thank you, and the importance of relationships by Ms. Kelly Underwood, we also spent time on behavioral and mental health, and that was presented by Ms. Sharita Cobb, Director of Student Support Services. Dr. Dawson, our Deputy Superintendent, addressed how to take on unfinished learning and accelerate student learning in our schools. And then guest speaker Chenoweth discussed her work findings by examining and engaging Orange County school staff with the most important question in education. And Ms. Chenoweth cited that good, solid leadership is the number one key to any school or district success. This year, we will turn to the details of data to meet every student's needs, meet their needs in terms of where they are in every area now that they have returned. And we appreciate Ms. Chenoweth's time and expertise on how to affect greatness in our classrooms and the district. We thank Mrs. Smiley for reaching out to Ms. Chenoweth and having her join us for Convocation Day. And so now the first day of school. So staff from every site in Orange County schools greeted and welcomed students back to school today. And these are just some of the pictures, that were gathered. Aside from some heavier than normal roadway traffic, which some of you may have experienced, with student drop-off, overall the district experienced a smooth opening this morning. There was so much excitement, so much energy, and possibility for our students this year. And of course, although we were all masked, mask compliance was very strong, we could certainly see the smiles radiating from staff and students despite the mask. And so without question, we are thrilled that students are back in our buildings for in-person learning. It was a great first day. So those are just some information items we wanted to share. And then, speaking of students returning, we want to share with the board, provide an update with regards to student enrollment. So Kathleen Dawson, Dr. Dawson will provide the information. So Dr. Dawson.
Good evening, Chair McKenzie, Vice Chair Stevens, board members, other community members. We just wanted to share with you as of Saturday where we are with enrollment for this new year compared to where we were at the 10-day count last year. So it's really important to know this is not apples for apples, but just kind of gauging, giving us a gauge of where are we right now, because as we know, we took a little bit of a dip in enrollment last year based on the COVID being where it was, and this year, here's where we are. In this particular chart, what you're going to see is a comparison between 10-day count and then the 2021 enrollment as of Saturday. So if you look across the x-axis, you're going to see the school and by grade, and you'll see where it's highlighted in orange. That's either the change, right? Either an increase or a decrease or staying the same in enrollment for that grade. And then you'll see going vertically on the y-axis at the very bottom, per grade, what the total is across the district. So you can kind of see that we are taking a decrease in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, but there was an uptick for our third graders and by 45, and then fourth grade by 2, and then another dip in fifth grade. And so if we go to the next slide, we'll take a look at our secondary grades, and you'll see here where we are with middle school. You're going to see, again, there are some schools that took an increase, decrease, and if you look where it says total right underneath that online academy for our sixth graders, we overall this year looks like we're increasing by 45, but then in seventh grade dipping by 37 and dipping by 31 in eighth grade. And then if you take a look at the high school, you can see again the similar numbers. It's like an orange, we're taking in the orange column, sorry. Total in ninth grade, we are seeing that there is an increase by 102 students, and then in 10th grade by 3, 11th grade by 65, but then in our senior class, it's looking like we're taking a decrease by 70. And so if you look on the next slide, just kind of overall, all school district-wide in total enrollment, you can see in that change column, that's the change per school overall enrollment. But total overall as a district, we're up by 15. And as you know, towards the beginning of every year, there's an uptick in last-minute registration. And we do have about 215 in queue at the schools. That doesn't necessarily mean 215 new students waiting, because there will be some variation there because some of our students may be trying to sign up to get on the wait list for Online Academy, and some might be registering and they don't need to be registering. So there's some of that, but we do know that there was a high uptick of registrations last year. And so after the 10-day count, we'll bring back a more accurate comparison from 10-day count for 2020 and 2021. We'll have better numbers for you, but we wanted to give you that as of right now, we're higher than where we were last year, and we hope that this number continues to increase. So just again, though, it's important to note it's not apples for apples. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Dawson.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Just one question. So middle school seems to have the largest number of changes. Do we understand that, or do we have any insight why it's the middle school?
Mr. Emily, if we could just go back one slide. I'm sorry. Yeah, right here. So this is actually, it appears to be the consistent. I think when you take a look at, middle school families, they want more choice. And so oftentimes, and I don't think that it is an Orange County school phenomenon. I've seen it across actually multiple districts and across the country. There is that. So I think we have an opportunity for us to take a look at why it is that, this is happening, and then are there opportunities for us to increase choice for our middle school? And I think that offering the online academy was definitely a choice that a number of our family doctors appreciated.
Smiley, and then the father. I seem to remember that 2020 we took quite a dip from the year before that. What, just that total number, do you know what the number was for 2019? Sorry, on the next slide.
And you know what, I was going to look that up.
If you don't have it, that is totally fine. Knowing that last year was a little bit of an abnormality and we lost some students, I would expect to have a bigger number this year, and I'm just curious how close we might be.
I remember 73 sometime.
But I think that's right.
But I will definitely get that for you, and then definitely we'll provide an update after our 10-day count.
Yeah.
Now we have more historical data for you.
Just two quick questions. One is, some of the declines are actually kids that went into online academy, correct? So we didn't actually leave the system.
Correct.
So it would be helpful to understand that. And I just remember, and this is maybe a naive question, but I remember last year when COVID happened, there was a sense that many people kept their kindergartners out because of COVID. So I would have expected to see a spike in K and in 1 this year, but we're not seeing that.
Currently, no.
So any thoughts on that, or fill it up again?
I think that, we're still in a pandemic, right? And so, while we are returning to in-person, we still have a lot of concerns. And so I think if families are continuing to keep their current, new rising kindergartners home still, I think that's understandable and similar to last year. So again, we will get you more accurate data. We'll look at more of those, because I would like to see, because if those were, our kindergartners, and then just kind of overall, all the grades, just to be able to see more information. And we were trying to bring for you some more demographic information, but schools are still tweaking all those numbers and data, and so we didn't want to bring something that was inaccurate. And so this is something that we had, as of right now, Saturday registration versus 10 days. So we'll bring back much more accurate comparison and trend data for you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, thank you so much. Now we'll welcome Hatcher, I believe, for capital management staffing update. Is it Dr. Hatcher or Okay, sure, I got it right. Welcome.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Vice Chair. I'm sorry. Okay. We're going to try this again. Okay. Good evening, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, Board members, and Dr. Felder. I come before you this evening to give an update on our human capital staffing for the upcoming school year. Currently, we have 29.5 certified positions that are currently vacant, and that's what you will see here if you add these breakdowns together. This is slightly higher than what we had last year. Last year, we had 16.9 certified vacancies, and this can be contributed to, we did add some new positions midway through our recruitment process. Also, too, we're going to be looking at some district needs. As you can see at the bottom, we're going to continue to recruit for part-time child nutrition assistants and substitutes. We are super duper excited about our substitute numbers. They are rising. We currently have 93 substitute teachers, and we are steadily recruiting for those positions. Also, too, we have under the district newly created positions, the mental health, social worker, and counselor position. These are some newly created positions that we have asked for, and they have been approved, so we do thank you for that. Also, too, we will also be adding additional staffing in ELL and AIG, math positions, and math coaching positions. So this is just an overview of our current staff and openings. Also, too, next slide, we do want to talk about, and I'm super duper excited about our recruitment policy. It's
really fortunate here that we do have the opportunity to extend these bonuses to our staff members. And we currently have six positions on the board report tonight that will qualify for this retention bonus. So we are super duper excited about these efforts in an attempt to help us retain and recruit our staff here at Orange County Public Schools. And again, at this point, if there are any questions of me, I will take those at this time.
On the, I saw you listed that there's any of the substitute bus drivers. About how many do we have open? Does that mean we have all bus drivers filled at this point for transportation, or we just need substitutes? And if so, how many positions do we have open?
Connie is shaking her head. It's good.
So right now, Mr. Albert has the routes covered. Where we are trying to heavily recruit for substitutes, because if you know anything about transportation, if people call in, then there's going to be, an issue. I do know as we start to add students to buses, of course that can change. That's typical in any school year. It's especially going to be the case this year. But as of Friday, he was covering the routes, all routes. So, and that was with some last minute conditional approvals. But we're still heavily recruiting.
Excellent. Yeah, the other question I had is, a couple of years ago, we significantly changed the compensation bonuses. Has that affected it? Are you saying we're being more conducive to getting people now with those changes?
I definitely think, from my perspective, the salary increases have helped. It definitely helps with the subpopulation. So I think, we have continued the higher rates unless this board decides otherwise. But that has definitely helped, because I think that last year this time we're at 40, and so we're approaching 100.
The surrounding districts also increased their salaries and such for bus drivers, correct?
And I just want to say too, from the vacancy perspective, that we do, as Inspector says, we do have more vacancies than we had last year this time. But again, we added a district AIT position at Restore. We added to mental health social. So some of those positions are accounted for in some of our staffing to address needs. So I don't, from my perspective, we're not totally off where we were last year.
Are there any other questions?
Yes, I guess, and I don't, maybe you can do it in a report later. I'm trying to understand, like, when you presented the opening, there's core, non-core teachers, but I think, like, where would AIG fit in? Would the MTSS specialists or the math specialists that we're hiring? So I don't know, but that's how you've asked us to budget it, but I don't know how they show in the opening. So how do we?
So basically, to your question, and thank you for your question, those positions that you listed are not core positions. Okay. So we would have to, to your point, put them in another category. Our core positions are going to be math, science, English, social studies. And if you really look at your core positions too, you can also look at those hard to fill positions, and that can also be categorized in there. And if that's the case, we would then add exceptional children. So we can look at breaking that out so that it does make more sense. But those positions that you listed, those are not core positions. So those are instructional support positions.
Okay. Were they listed on your table of openings?
Yes, ma'am.
And one other question is that the mini grants that we've opened up to the schools, are the schools allowed to apply for interim staff? For interim staff?
They have.
They have?
So that's where the math coaches were derived from. So yes, they have. In this second round of mini grants, we've asked that they not leverage them for positions, but leverage them in other ways, i.e. With perhaps securing tutors or professional development, instructional materials, etc. Yeah, but all data-driven. So based on data, they have to make a strong connection to their mini grant request.
For our online academy, are there any openings outstanding for that, or are they open that? So
Remember on the
we're
current,
all good, there's no staff needed for that.
remember in the current online model, we are not pulling staff from our schools. So our schools are, for instance, we're not hiring teachers per se. That was part of the online curriculum that the teachers are provided that way. So to my knowledge, Dr. Carter would be a better answer than I, but I believe that those positions are coming very.
So maybe I should ask it slightly different. So one of the things we talked about was making sure that the online was getting the same type of resources, not the teachers. So for example, the math facilitators, I would assume that they are getting support for that, and we have someone that's covering that, so they're getting the additional support through that. Is that correct? Or
so the ADM remains at the school, and so students, their AIG support, EC support, EL support would come from the school.
so we have some students that are coming in out of district. How are they getting classified? I know there was just a few. Yeah, so have we picked a place and said this will be your home school to account for that, or?
We are.
Okay, okay, all right, thank you.
Great. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
You are pretty good. Thank you. And Ms. Hatcher, as you leave, I'd like to comment that I admire the colors of the pen you're wearing. It's a good choice. It's a comment. Well, speaking of Online Academy, the next item, we'd like to provide the board an update on Orange County Schools Online Academy, and to do that, we have Dr. Megan Doyle.
Does she know it's her time?
My apologies. It's Dr. Doyle. I'm sorry, Dr. Dawson. On these. Giving the update. And she just sat there and she did.
Yeah, I thought it was Dr. Doyle as well. So.
Let's see how this goes.
Okay, so as you can see in the corner, our new logo for Online Academy inclusive, right? So the logo has been finalized, and so tonight, again, we're just here to provide you some updates of where we are. The registration processes, the wait list has been initiated, so, families are being encouraged to sign up for the wait list, should they be interested. As students, transfer out and open up a seat, then they will go following along the order in which wait list came together. 30 students were removed from the wait list as of August 13th and enrolled in Orange County schools. And so we have 182 students enrolled, but as you saw in the previous chart that I shared, we have 172 currently that were registered. So as far as curriculum, we are in agreement with the Options Academy curriculum that's being executed. And then for our student services, you'll see that there's a service plan for our counselors, AIG, ESL, EC supports that are created and being communicated. And for public information and family engagement, as you know, we have the website created on our district website. There have been very successful student and family orientations. 165 of our 172 parents and families actually attended. And for operations, we are in the process of continuing to evaluate the physical spaces for our conferencing, parent meetings, tutor sessions, small group sessions. This week, as you know, as we launched school, it's been a great opportunity for us to connect with our online students to build a sense of community and sense of belonging. So we're really spending this week to make sure that there's that connection to Orange County schools, because
with ed options being that they're having teachers that aren't necessarily here, you know, we don't want them to feel disconnected from us. And so we are making sure that we district level staff, and I do want to give special thanks to, I can't name them all, but you know, definitely Dr. Doyle, our CNI team, you know, various facilitators and coaches, and then of course especially our two school leaders, Principal Farrington and our assistant principal, Ms. Rene. They've been doing an excellent job, and this week they're meeting with all of the students in person, virtually, to make sure that the kids know who their school leaders are. They're doing one-to-one small group sessions to make sure that they have their schedules that are correct and aligned with their, especially their electives towards the older students. But really that connection around the social and emotional well-being of our students, but building a sense of community and belonging, and then kids having opportunities to meet each other so that they know who they're in school with, even though they may not be physically present. So this has been a great opportunity this week for that, and then by next week they will be fully starting their courses, and they're doing some diagnostics just like in our regular schools, and that information will be shared with our support services staff, such as our AIG, ESL, and EC, so that they can continue to provide that individualized tiered support for our students, even though they're not, you know, in person.
I have one question for you, Dr. Dawson. Did you say that 172 students are currently registered in the online academy?
So 182, but as far as like what we have for a school count right now, as you saw, I wanted you to see that there was a discrepancy, because on the chart it said 172. But then we have 182 that did sign up. It's a matter of will they show and attend, and then we'll. And that's why the attendance count will be important.
If they don't show up in that 10 days, then we would move 10 students off of our wait list.
Correct. Okay. And we will give them in the order in which they signed up.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you. Ms. Doyle?
I had a question, Dr. Dawson. If, assuming some students are motivated to be in the online academy because of COVID, if situations change, like maybe younger students can be vaccinated or things, and they want to be back in their district or school, do they wait till the end of the first semester to, you know, move back to New Hope Elementary or wherever they would be otherwise, or what would that process be?
So we do have time, yes, so that they can finish a course, or if it's a semesterized course, because we want to give least disruption, right? Create least disruption in their learning. So there are natural breaks in their grading and course, and those would be the times that there could be transfers in or out.
Other board members?
On the conference spaces that y'all are looking at, is that at the Welcome Center?
We are currently looking at the staff building, right? The gym building. So I think that was one option, but I think that they were looking at other options.
Yeah, I just want to say again, I feel strongly about partnership going to that building and then having a place. So I hate to end up where we can't put them in there because we're using it for something else. I just want to say my strong support of getting those kids in a place where they can play outside safely and have an environment. So.
Absolutely. And Mr. Estes, please know that when we're looking, because when we did look at that space and did our site visit, it would be just one, like as soon as you walk in, it's just one area. Because remember, for our online students, they're not coming on a regular. If they're coming, it would be like small group or individual for sessions, so it's not like they need a lot of space. But online academy itself needs a physical office space. So that would be like the extent. But also when our students have to take assessments that require them to be in person, those are opportunities and times that we will schedule where there's space available, and that doesn't always have to be like a big space there, but it could be, say that, you know, a partnership is done that day, and then families are coming in, you know, at a different time when they're not there. There are all different ways that we make accommodate our online students and their schedules to be able to come in, and that usually would not, you know, interrupt schools that are in person.
I hear you. I just wanted to say it out loud, so thank you.
Other questions or comments? Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Dawson.
Thank you.
believe we're moving into staff and family information sessions.
Yes, so this is part of the health and safety update.
Right. Excuse me. I was trying to follow the right, okay, got it. So technically this is moving on to the next information item. Staff and family information sessions. Welcome, Mr. Abley.
Good to be back with you this evening. So just wanted to give a report on two of the information sessions that were held post the last board meeting in which we did discuss health and safety expectations to start the school year. Knowing there was some new information in that, obviously we were changing and operating under the most recent guidance from the ABC Science Collaborative, the Orange County Health Department, and other information that was released in the Department of Health and Human Services Toolkit for Schools. We met in a special call board meeting, and so we know that came quickly and wanted to provide opportunities for both staff and families where we could provide more time with explanations, answering questions, and putting out clarity to our stakeholders. So we had approximately 30 staff members attended the staff session. Know that's in addition to a staff handbook and guide that was released, and also that was their convocation day. So for many of them, it was a very long day, but we continue to engage our staff in the expectations. And since then, I've gone out we met with the group at a school last week as well. So we're doing other events and going out and speaking with folks in order to ensure they have clarified information to them. We had 50-plus families that came online for the parent session that we held that night. It was an hour webinar. Both of those sessions were recorded, and then we do have frequently asked questions from the family session. And we'll continue to have additional sessions as well. We know during the family session there were several questions that came up specific to athletics, and so we know one of our next sessions will be specifically targeted for those family members. So just wanted to give a brief update about how we're conveying information out to our stakeholders and opportunities for individuals who may not be able to make the board meetings and hear the information and be able to give them additional information as well. Questions or comments after those sessions?
I don't think.
So you can tell me to ask this in a moment, but my question is around the chorus and band classes. We did get a lot of questions about 15 minutes per hour while playing. So 15 minutes I could play, and then they'd have to wait. And I wanted to get an update or hear an update on that. I know that, looking at the surrounding counties, it's very different on how they're approaching allowing this. Even some are an hour, some are 45 minutes with a 15-minute break. And I heard that some of the teachers wanted to go outside, even if they could get more time, and they were told no. So I'd just like to try to get an update on where we are and what guidance are we giving on that, and what are we saying, just so we're informed of it as well.
Okay. So that's our next topic, which is an update on the health and safety guidelines and expectations. So I'm happy to start with Mr. Atherton with that question. So our guidance to the schools, knowing how they operated in the spring, which was approximately 45 minutes of time playing or speaking, singing, dancing, whatever the arts were performing, in a classroom with a 15-minute break on their time that students were together. We also know during the spring there were a couple different things that are not the same as they are today. One is we didn't have the Delta virus. We didn't have a highly transmissible strain that was more transmissible among students in a population being together for a prolonged period of time. The guidance that the board has adopted in the district has been 15 minutes for eating. And so when we look at our guidance starting out this school year, we know we have a more dangerous strain spring, we were doing cohorts. We had more students who were engaged remotely, not in individual classrooms. We've not changed our classroom sizes. The classrooms are still the same. We have added the ionizers to the classroom. We did a little bit more research on the air purifiers and how many air exchanges were happening per hour with them. And knowing that the toolkit and the guidance specifically talks about the arts, band, music, wind instruments, and those instruments that can present more concerns or danger, especially in the indoor environment, we felt the recommendation really should be starting out the first 3 weeks of the school year until we have, as we mentioned to you, our first check-in on how things have gone. 15 minutes limited with singing per hour. So for a 90 or wind instruments, either one. So for a 90-minute block class, that's 30 minutes. That's 30% of the time in that class that they would be able to sing or perform. Now, it also doesn't mean that all students have to do it at the same time. I could have this half of the room performing for 15 minutes, and then I could have this half of the room performing for 15 minutes. The idea is we're reducing the amount of people that are speaking, talking, singing, playing at the exact same time, reducing our transmission loads, allowing our air systems to work. Doesn't matter how much, we don't look at our air volume and we don't look at the amount of ventilation we're providing. We've got to make sure it's safe for those students in that classroom. The other thing we have to look at is how safe it is for first period class. Has to be exactly the same safeness when the fourth period class walks into the classroom. And so if we allow first period, second period, third period to have extended period of time when they're in the classroom and they're playing, we know there's a transmission risk. We have to ensure that classroom is just as safe for fourth period because there's only so much that the air systems and the ionizers and the air purifiers can do. So that comes to our second recommendation, which is utilize outdoor spaces or other spaces to the extent possible and available. And so that brings me to the first toolkit update. So again, we were more stringent. I think Orange County has led the way when it comes to being proactive, not waiting on statistics, not waiting on clusters, not waiting on closures to put recommendations in place. So we went with our more stringent recommendation. I don't argue or not one bit that there are other districts around us allowing other things to happen and other things to go on, and they'll be responsible for their results accordingly. For us, when the DHHS toolkit came out, I believe it was in line with what we were seeing about how much more dangerous it could be in those classrooms when you have individuals performing, singing, etc. Because the new toolkit update on August 18th says now in those classrooms you have to be 6 feet apart. Well, it's 3 feet to the extent possible. And so now it's 6 feet. And so immediately folks are saying that's difficult. We're not going to be able to have 15, 20 band members or singers 6 feet apart in the classroom. So you can see by that change in the toolkit to 6 feet, there are concerns about what's happening in classrooms, especially with the Delta virus. So I don't think our recommendation was too far off, although it might be subjective to either changing to allow you more minutes or taking minutes away. We felt like starting the school year with a time limit that was very similar to what we were doing in the classrooms with students eating was fair and a reasonable approach compared to last year with the number of minutes and the number of students in the classroom. We are, as you saw by the other agenda item, looking at outdoor spaces, other places. We do have singer's masks. We do have the other masks that the wind instrument players will be using, bell covers, all those other things to assist and help out, like I said, with ionizers and everything we're doing within the classroom. So there is no perfect or ideal situation. I think what you're seeing is a variety of things that are happening. But we would hope everyone would want us to be as safe as we can be. And then we can maybe look at that if we're not having cases, we're not having clusters, we're not having secondary transmission, and things are going well, then we're all for let's increase the minutes. That was the plan, was let's start out, as we stated to the board, for 3 weeks till about September 15th. We'll know. we'll know by September 15th. When you look at the number of cases and the transmissibility and close contacts and how many people are with the numbers and where we are, we'll know by then as a first check-in, do we continue being as straightforward and as stringent as we can be, or can we back off and relax some of the items that we started with?
So could you say, I mean, you started to, but I didn't hear it, on the outdoor, how would that be different if they are spaced out further in, say, the stadium?
They play 89 minutes outside.
Okay, so that's the clarity that I was looking for. Thank you.
Because, I mean, they play as long as they want. They can space out 10 feet, 12 feet. You know, the idea is 6 feet is the minimum. If you get as far apart as you can, you can use the stadium, you can use other spaces where there is no limit outdoors.
Okay.
The limit was indoors based on ventilation.
And I think that has been the confusion and why I was asking it that way, because you know, many people have asked about, oh, it's 15 minutes whether you're inside, outside, and I think there's that confusion, and that's why I ask it, you know, that way. So thank you for that clarity.
Okay, so we have a list of other items here we just wanted to mention this evening. There were a couple other items within the toolkit that were updated as well. One of those was symptoms. I know this is in your materials, but I'm going to read it because the public may be hearing it tonight or hearing it later on. But there have been some changes to symptoms, and so we continue to ask parents. We are not doing temperature checks or screening of students at this time. That's no longer recommended. However, parents are still asked to screen students prior to sending them to school, and please do not send students to school. The newest one added to the list was severe headache, fever or chills, cough, shortness of breath, difficulty breathing, fatigue, muscle or body ache, headache, new loss of taste or smell, sore throat, congestion or runny nose, nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. Some of those obviously were on the list previously, but the headache seemed to be a newer symptom and more severe symptom as we are hearing about the COVID update. And then, as I mentioned, the second major update, August 18th, was the 6 feet for the indoor, and they go even farther, singing, shouting, playing wind instruments, rigorous dance and exercise, and they recommend that to be outside. And so that was the toolkit update. And the third thing that was updated in the toolkit was some of the quarantine processes and procedures. However, Orange County Health Department is more strict. We follow the local health department guidance, and so the toolkit had in there the requirement with distancing in a classroom. This is just a classroom setting with that 3 feet per student. So if you have a student that's positive, the look-back time is still the 15 minutes. The individuals within close contact, and were they within 3 feet of each other. And so that is still the requirement for the Orange County Health Department. So, you know, as folks are looking at the toolkit and thinking, well, why is my child quarantining if this is the situation, or, you know, why should I be quarantining because this is what I'm seeing in the toolkit? I just want to recognize that part of the toolkit. We do have different standards in Orange County following our local health department. What's in our guide to parents and what information goes out to parents is the most up-to-date information from the Orange County Health Department. So there are a few other things I would like to mention this evening as we talk about. One was athletics and extracurricular activities. We know we spent quite a bit of time talking about that at your last meeting. I think to better implement what was discussed with the board, with students to participate in athletic clubs or extracurricular activities, being required to complete the biweekly COVID-19 testing unless they're vaccinated. What we've presented to you this evening is regulations to help guide that. That gives more clarity to the guidance. And again, and I won't read all of these, but this provision does not apply to students who are not eligible for vaccination. We'll talk about the Pfizer vaccine that was approved today for individuals 16 and above. But again, we have student athletes, we have students that are participating in extracurricular activities. They're 12 years of age, they're not eligible for vaccination. They're still eligible to participate they would be required to wear masks, and they are required to participate in the COVID testing. The testing requirements does not apply to students involved with extracurricular activities that are graded, are part of a class requirement, the school curriculum program, or class offerings. So within our school district, there are many extracurricular activities that are tied directly to those things I mentioned. They're graded, they're part of the class, they're part of the curriculum or class offering, and it's a requirement that they participate outside the school day for those activities that would be excluded from this requirement. The testing requirements do not apply to after-school programs. We've had that question. My child's in after-school care. Are they required? No, they are not. Or extracurricular activities that are only being conducted on the school campus for students of that school. They're non-competitive, where students do not travel with other schools or teams. So, for instance, I give here, I'm a computer teacher. I have a computer club. There's students from my school. We meet Tuesdays and Thursdays. It's only students from my school. We don't travel. We don't compete. We don't go anywhere else. They're following the same regulations they would in school. If after school, they would be excluded. There is no contact outside the school. The vaccination or testing requirements are mandatory and apply to after-club sports, after-school sports, off-season athletic groups that are holding workouts, conditioning drills, camps, practices, scrimmage, or competitions. Because again, it's the athletes that are in that high-risk category, and so even if you're out of season, but you're meeting as a team, you're meeting conditioning, working, doing drills, it's just the same concern that we would have for those that are actually in season practicing or competing. All students would have to have parental permission to complete testing as outlined above. They would be ineligible until they show proof of vaccination or complete the parental permission form for testing. Students may not substitute doctor's notes, alternate testing, or testing performed outside the Orange County schools. We've had that question asked, can I take my child to an alternate provider or get an alternate diagnosis? They would follow the same testing protocol we have in place. And with the Orange County Health Department, that testing is a PCR test. It is not the rapid antigen test. The PCR test is a more thorough test. It takes about 24 hours for us to get the results back. They would still be eligible until we got the results back. And at that time, we'd require them to no longer be eligible. All COVID-19 results will remain private, will only be released to authorized health professionals required to report communicable disease test results. Aggregate data for test percentages by sports team or extracurricular program will not be released, and I want to explain that. We have concerns about our students already who may be vaccinated or unvaccinated for various reasons. There's concerns when you start naming schools or sports teams or individuals and releasing the percentage of students that are vaccinated or not vaccinated, especially when you start to fall to 90%, 10%. A school that's 20% versus 60%. We know there's a political line that is drawn on this subject. We do not want our students subject to that. We want to make sure we're protecting them, protecting their privacy, that individuals are not going down rosters trying to figure out who is or is not vaccinated on a team, who is part of the testing program or not. Our recommendation is we can provide results for athletes, we can provide results for schools, but we should not release results, and that's something we hadn't talked about. But as we had more questions come up about those results and how those results were reported, we do not feel it's in the best interest of our students to release those at the finer detail level. And so as part of our regulations, we wanted to spell out how the results would be collected and how the results would be reported by aggregate but not at the individual team level. Or extracurricular activities, for instance, if it is a club, etc., we wouldn't be naming that particular club. We would just say extracurricular activities, here's the percentage. Questions about that?
So you mentioned in your example like a computer club that was like a classroom club would be exempt. We do have some clubs that meet between the two high schools, you know, so like our high school robotics meets at Orange, but students from other high schools can come attend there. So would students from other high schools have to test to go over to Orange, or would the students at Orange also have to test to be there for the club? Or?
Yeah, so one thing we talked about is we can't regulate testing requirements unless the attorney knows something like it's been discussed and it hasn't been released yet, but we can't require other schools, to my knowledge, that they have students that are vaccinated to come onto our campus.
Let me interrupt. I mean, within our district, though.
Within our district.
Cedar Ridge students coming over to Orange.
If they're within our district and they're competing school to school, they would fall under the regulations for testing, because at that point we could have transmission between one school to another. That's certainly a board's choice, but our recommendation is if the student is leaving outside their school and they're competing with, engaging with, or with students from another school, even in county or out of county, they should fall under the requirements that the board has put in place, which is extracurricular activities, perform the testing unless the students are vaccinated.
Thank you. And there's one other question. My other question is, when you were mentioning the need for like privacy regarding teams and rates of vaccination and things like that, does that preclude us considering at some point, you know, there's a level of safety if you take a certain team or you take all our teams, you know, if we had a certain number of students vaccinated, there's a level of safety that brings. Are we not going to be able to consider rates like that if we aren't able to look at individual teams? Or
So that's a great question. We'll have the data. We'll have the information. What we're suggesting is we don't release it publicly to protect our students. However, following the toolkit, the guidance, you heard Dr. Benjamin with the ABC Science Collaborative present information, especially when it comes to athletics. The guidance, the current guidance is for those high-risk sports, when you have high community transmission, which we're at, the sports would not participate. They would participate virtually, or only those students that are vaccinated would have the ability to participate. At that point, you would need to know, if that's the decision, which students are vaccinated or not vaccinated. The second reason it's important is because as students may come in contact with another student, athlete, player, etc., that's positive, that vaccination status starts to become important when we look at quarantining and students being excluded. And so we would want to know that as well. So we, again, are still asking folks to report that, so we have that knowledge, and that can be used for contact tracing, all the other reasons that we would want to know that.
thank you.
So last time when we were discussing this, I had asked, does this include other clubs? And I was told no, but this clearly now covers other clubs. And Ms. Dole's point, the robotics is a perfect example because it is competitive. They do go to compete, and normally they're the only people in the field of play while they're doing. But based on this, they would be required to testing. This would also include now FFA, who then has animals that they go, but they don't compete till the end of the year, but this implies that they're still going to be tested weekly even though they don't have a competition till then. So I'd like us to put some maybe common sense around some of this that says, you know, if you're not competing, then you don't need to be testing, and we may be in a better state, or, you know, if they're not competing till the end of the year, testing them weekly does not make sense to me based on how it's written. So I think we also need to list out these clubs to help families and teachers and sponsors understand that, because I do believe there's a lot more competitive in nature that's more academic types of things than just sports. Anyway, those are my comments around it.
I just have a question on quarantine. So if someone tests positive for COVID, who gets quarantined? And how do we decide that?
The health department makes the determination with the input that they receive with the school nurses from the school level. So that the quarantine would start immediately for the individuals that tested positive. It also depends if individuals are showing symptoms. You know, are you asymptomatic? Have you been vaccinated? How much time were you spending near that person? Is it longer than 15 minutes? So there's a host of factors that may determine that, but the health department makes the determination. What we also say is sometimes students go in isolation. I know I was in contact with someone who was positive. That person obviously has to quarantine because they're positive. I was within a certain time frame or certain period amount of time with them. I'll start in isolation while we're getting this assessment determination done. And then if it's determined that I should be in quarantine, then I'm notified that I began the quarantine process. But immediately what we do is isolate folks. But the health department makes that determination with the school nurses.
Does that include the sports teams, like if we
It does.
quarantine the volleyball team, and the health department deciding that?
Yes, the health department is involved with all quarantine decisions.
Any questions? Well, yeah, speaking of quarantine, I guess this would be the time to throw it in. I asked this question and I was told that I'd get the answer tonight, but I'd like to know, like, students who are in quarantine, will they have an opportunity to receive instruction while they're out of school?
We will provide more information later on tonight.
But later on. All right, I just didn't want to miss it because I've been asked that, so didn't want to miss it.
Very good. Other questions or comments?
Our lead school nurse is not online because she got disconnected with our technology, but she did say that on the isolation, is only if they're positive or symptomatic. So, you know, that's the other thing you're looking for. And that the health department did not approve the antibody test to get out of quarantine, and that was another option within the update. So in Orange County, you cannot go get an antigen test to get out of quarantine. You have to fill out your quarantine time.
Every time.
So as far as, Mr. Atherton, to your question, I think that's the clarity we can provide either way. We tried to present back to you regulations based on the motion we heard, which included extracurricular, but we didn't hear in the motion just the things that were listed or if we were going to exclude other groups. And one example I'll bring back this evening is the band. And so Ms. Braxton has done some research and provided an update on that. And so when we have a policy or a specific requirement, that's when all these nuances, you know, we start to look at and see what applies. But as far as the band in chorus, the band is where we have a discrepancy. Both Orange High School and Cedar Ridge High School offer multiple band classes. Both schools offer wind ensemble and jazz band. Cedar Ridge High School offers IB music and concert band, while Orange High School offers percussion and marching band. There are differences in course offerings, but there are also similarities. Cedar Ridge High School is an IB school with IB music as a course offering. Therefore, marching band is not a course, but rather an extracurricular opportunity for students to perform at home football games. And so for Orange High School, it's a class. It's a class requirement. Marching band is part of that. It's offered as a class. You take the class, and you also perform outside of the school day as a class. Cedar Ridge High School is an extracurricular activity, totally voluntary, totally on the students to participate or not. When we talked about vaccination or testing requirements, it was in reference to students, athletes, and those involved in extracurriculars that were separated from the school day. This board has not recommended or advised testing as a requirement for students during the school day. So we were trying to separate the two, and within the regulations, felt like we were getting close, except there might be some exceptions. You know, certainly if the board wants to include this group or that group, but band is still an outlier. The because in truly at one high school, it's class. Another high school, extracurricular. And I'll stop there because that's probably a clarifying piece that we need to know moving forward.
Ms. Smiley, I have two thoughts. One is we talked in the last meeting about the desire for parity across the two schools, and that was around this idea that vaccinations could be required for bands in one of the schools, but potentially could for the other. I do personally feel differently about testing. In a, we should just do what is common sense and safe, and testing feels much sort of lower threshold to me than something like vaccinations, where I'm personally less concerned about like perfect parity across the two schools. The other thing I just want to share their reaction is, it is clear to me that you and your team are being very thoughtful about thinking about what actually makes sense given the level of risk in these different activities. And so I personally don't feel the need to weigh in on particular clubs or things like that. Certainly I think us raising examples is helpful for you all to consider, but then I trust you to make the right decisions about what is safest for students and sort of common sense.
Thank you. And we tried to follow the guidance of the ABC Science Collaborative because this question came up about sports. And when you start naming individual sports with different requirements, I think we could have the same concern with extracurricular. And each one has a different guide as to what's required, when it's required, how it's required. And when we look at fidelity and we look at accountability, it can be difficult to implement and difficult to manage and difficult to maintain if we have every club or every sport with different requirements. And that's why the ABC Science Collaborative recommended what we do was, for athletics, for extracurricular, et cetera, with experts. Although certainly as a board, it's a local decision as to where we want to draw any lines, if at all, and what parameters we put on those. And yes, we certainly have tried to understand how to implement this, how to communicate this, and how to make sure we're meeting the expectation of the board. And so that's difficult. So certainly, we take any suggestions or input the board has on how and who and what we should be doing to implement the process.
I just want to reiterate, I want to make sure we use common sense around this, and I'll go back to the FFA. If it's an individual that's taking care of an animal in a barn, not around anybody else, that doesn't make any sense to be testing them weekly, especially if they're not going to be showing that animal till the end of the year and not be in that environment. That to me doesn't make sense to put that on them. I do have concerns about the parity between the schools and all of a sudden saying, okay, you're taking this class and now you must be tested, and now we're, I think, going over a line somewhere, requiring it for people that are taking it as part of a grade versus someone that's not. I don't think there's an easy answer anywhere on here, but I don't know where the line stops. If we say, okay, you're doing this as a grade, you must do it, now is that child now going to withdraw? Are they not going to compete? What are the options that come up because of that?
But that's not the recommendation, right? You're recommending.
No. You were talking about trying to keep parity. I'm just saying I would not be supportive of crossing that line where we go, hey, we're now going to test people in class.
I don't think that was the recommendation. Ms. Doyle? I appreciate this conversation because there are lots of nuances, and I do echo Ms. Smiley that I appreciate the level of detail and thoughtfulness that you're giving to all these. And considering my mind was thinking about robotics and have students from one school come over, even though this is off season, they just meet throughout the year. But if we start requiring, if you're visiting other schools, then we also have a whole bunch of schools going to Durham Tech. A whole bunch of students go to, if our level of expectation is that you're visiting different school buildings, you need to be tested. That is, a whole bunch more testing requirements for things like visiting Durham Tech. So I think that's a tricky line to lay down, but I'll just leave it there for people to think about.
but that wouldn't be extracurricular activity.
Exactly.
So,
But it'd be the same level
yeah.
of risk if all you're doing is,
I agree. I was just trying to,
right.
They're going to Durham Tech. They're going to credit.
So I personally think we have some really good guardrails in place, and I do trust Dr. Felder and Mr. Abley to decide what they think is common sense and appropriate in this situation. So for me personally, that's where I'm at. I'm here. So it sounds like a majority of the board feels that way. Is there
I would just like to make sure that as we go through this, the board is updated so we just understand what's being communicated. So if there's communication going on.
Communication is very important.
Right, I just want to say it because,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, if I could just add, we have an extremely rich, offering, and so there's lots of places where we can fall off the rail. So, yeah, communication is really important.
Fantastic. It sounds like we generally, am I capturing this correctly? We generally trust staff and expect really clear communication with the board and with families around what those expectations are. Fantastic.
All right, the next part was tent canopies and outdoor shade structures. You had that as part of your consent agenda as well. There's information in there as a follow-up. I'll just ask if there's any questions on that. I know we're behind time this evening.
Can I ask one question about that? Do we have a timetable for when we can expect tents to be up? I know that there were many kids that ate inside today, and I'm just really hoping we can get them outside as much as possible. I would love to reiterate my own personal preference that they're on towels outside as often as possible. But.
Yeah, well, we've already given permission for that. So, I mean, students can go outside at any point in time. I think there was concerns today with the heat index, but certainly what we try to do is to make sure that we're extending and learning outside as much as possible, especially eating when the masks come on. As far as tents, we'll start with portable first. We do have other options we're looking at with permanent structures or safe structures, and we're not in a lease agreement for tents continually, but the immediate need will be leasing of the tents that we need for our campuses. We'll do the location maps with the school principals on what the needs are. Have at least 2 or 3 located on the campus. A couple of things with that, we have to be mindful about where we're putting them. It doesn't help us put everybody underneath the tent, and then we have secondary transmissions outside under a tent. So there are other considerations besides just putting tents up and all the safety measures that go in. But we'll work immediately following our conversation tonight, and we have your approval to move forward with the funding that was in the consent agenda. The next item was mask compliance, as was mentioned earlier. There is a reporting form. There are compliance checks that are taking place. There is a hotline that folks can contact if there's any compliance issues or questions that need to be reported. Reported anonymously, and we'll continue to ensure that the requirements that this board has put in place, that the health department has, the ABC Science Collaborative or the Department of Health and Human Services are being followed. We know that the mask compliance is the key. We know this is a viral transmission, and we know the mask is an effective strategy to help us reduce the risk.
Could I request that we have a button or something on the website, and perhaps it's already there, but with that information really accessible on the main homepage, because a lot of people will tell me about mask compliance issues, and I always pass it along, but I say, call this number, and they're like, I don't know where that number is, and frankly, I don't either. So if it was somewhere very accessible to direct people, I think that might be helpful.
I think it'll be on the website tomorrow.
Thank you so much.
Because masks are so critical to our overall safety, have we considered upgrading the masks we hand out to the KN95? If we offer the option?
For staff or students?
Yes.
Staff would have the option if they follow the guidance. A KN95, as far as a respirator, falls under the same category as an N95 or any other 95 you want to put with it. A respirator is a respirator. Individuals that wear respirators should be fit tested, should have medical clearance, and should understand the parameters surrounding wearing a respirator. following all federal guidance as far as wearing a respirator. So we certainly can make respirators available, but we ask staff to make sure they follow through all the processes to do that. Students know because right now there's not parameters around students wearing respirators in a school environment. What's still recommended in the toolkit is a cloth face covering. However, what we have looked at is upgrading a couple different things, because I do think there are some upgrades that are needed. One is making sure the masks are adjustable so they fit students better, because one of the concerns that we heard based on the masks that were distributed and sent from the state last year is there were sizing issues, especially with younger elementary students versus high school students, and so making sure the masks are tightly fitting, adjustable, etc. The other thing is making sure that the masks are upgraded, so we have not just single ply, multiple ply, for students that can wear a higher quality mask, and we have different levels of procedure masks that we have available to us that we can get, and so making sure that it's not a respirator, but certainly can be more than what we have. We have procedure masks, regular masks we give students, we have available to them. And we certainly, one of the things we try to steer folks away from is there's a lot of companies out there selling things now, and I heard one the other day that said, this mask is so great you can blow a candle out in it. Well, that's wonderful. You want to blow a candle out, but we'd rather you not have that type of expiration coming out of your mouth strong enough to blow a candle out. Now, we know breathing in, it helps you breathe easier, but what we're concerned about is transmission and things expelling as well. So, sometimes students come to school with masks that just aren't fitting, aren't appropriate, maybe too thin, and so we change them out. And then we have masks that we need to help folks understand. For instance, last year, the mask that came from the state, if folks read the fine print, and I'm a fine print guy, so I read the fine print, and it said 15 washes, 15 weeks. So each one had 5, that's a week of school, and after 15 weeks you were supposed to replace it. That's from the manufacturer. And so we have to be careful of whatever we distribute, whatever we issue, whatever parents buy. My family, we buy these types of masks. We've replaced them 3 times already in the pandemic. They're only good for so long. They're only good for so many washes. That material starts to break down and it starts to get thin. And so we have to do a better job educating folks about buying cloth masks or masks that are appropriately fitting, but also making them understand that masks wear out. But I don't think we've had any guidance as far as respirators for students.
That's helpful to know for me, because I've had that question too.
All right, so we've got just a couple other items. We have placed additional information in your packet in reference to visitors and volunteers and facility rentals, and I'll mention those. We do have high community transmission for COVID-19. We're recommending closing of schools to visitors and volunteers with a few exceptions at this time. One, we need additional protocols for volunteers to be established following recommendations from the ABC Science Collaborative and the Orange County Health Department, especially if there's volunteers that are going to be spending an extended period of time inside classrooms near students. We need to discuss and talk about that protocol as far as vaccination requirements or COVID testing requirements before we allow them into the school setting. Because again, what we're trying to do is protect the environment. Visitors to school would certainly be allowed, but limited to parents or other individuals with appointments that are necessary to carry out educational functions on the campus. Parents are obviously welcome in schools to meet with teachers and other staff following all health and safety protocols. Virtual meetings are encouraged, and we do have contracted staff that are providing services to students. Those services will continue, and we are working on protocol and requirements, as we talked about in our last meeting, based on those individuals that are providing services, so they're following the same standards that we would require of our employees. Individuals that rent facilities would be permitted. We do have a couple that have already previously been approved. continue to be allowed under, as long as they're allowed under any North Carolina executive orders, Orange County executive orders, local health department, and OCS requirements. What we would want to ensure that all individuals running facilities follow established health and safety guidelines, including masking requirements, physical distancing, contact tracing. Contact tracing is important. All individuals using facilities within 24 hours of occupancy of a building by students or staff would be required to pay additional costs for enhanced cleaning and sanitation. So if we have a large group that's utilizing a space on a Sunday afternoon for 3 or 4 hours, that's within 24 hours of when our students and staff walk back into that space. We do have to go through enhanced protocol and enhanced cleaning to ensure that space is readily available. Got to make sure our air filtration is working appropriately and the space is being cleaned and sanitized. So there will be an additional cost in order for us to be able to do that. And then the district does reserve the right to cancel scheduled events based on closure of schools, health or safety concerns, or to protect the school environments from transmission of COVID-19. I know one of the difficulties with facility rentals is folks like to do those months out in advance. We're saying, again, if the situation warrants, we would have to cancel that event. We have a right to do so. I will tell you, if we do that, obviously we're not going to charge them a cancellation fee. They would receive a refund of whatever money they had paid. And the other thing we want to make users understand, if you're attending an event from someone else that's sponsoring an event on our campus, we cannot be, as a school district, responsible for COVID-19 transmission among that group of individuals. And so we would want to post and have that available to individuals that are deciding to attend those events. So those are just a few, as I looked at facility rentals, and I'm meeting with the team tomorrow to discuss and review what was previously approved. Items we feel need to be implemented immediately. If we are going to allow facility rentals on the board, certainly have the option to say no and to stop rentals, but we do have a couple we felt like needed to be reviewed based on the commitment of those groups already. And then the last thing was a vaccination status update. Joyce, I know you're here, so I'll let you go first and give a vaccination status update on employees, and then I'll talk about students.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Vice Chair of the Board, Dr. Fiddler. Dr. Thank you as well. I want to just provide an update on our vaccination status for our staff. There was a memo that went out today to all staff regarding the collection of documentation regarding vaccination. We will start this process on Wednesday, August 25th, and it will run through Friday, September the 10th. This will give staff time to give the necessary documentation needed, and then we also took into consideration that we do have a holiday coming up. The ways that staff will be able to complete the vaccination status form and submit this information to the Human Capital Office are as follows. They can do the Google form. The Google form will allow us to collect information in an efficient and effective manner. We're asking that all vaccinated staff complete the Google form. This offers a security and privacy configuration that complies with HIPAA regulations. And we're asking also to staff that are very comfortable and familiar with Google Docs, Google Forms to use this method. The form that went out this evening does have the attached Google form. Staff will be able to take a copy of their vaccination card, download that, and then provide that information to the Human Capital Office. Those individuals who want a little bit more up-close and personal approach can use we have an on-site data collection process that will start on Wednesday. We will be, Human Capital staff members will be going to each location at each school to provide this process. The documentation that went out this evening does include an online site schedule, so everybody will have an opportunity to make certain that their site will be served and have the ability to apply in person and can provide this information in person. We are asking that if you complete the Google form, that you do not have to do the information in person. And then the last one, if you want to just come over and visit us here at 200 King Street, you may 200 East King Street. they can complete the information in person here in our human capital office. So we are super excited about the ability to be able to capture this information. We also, regarding documentation, want to let staff know that vaccination cards are the only source of documentation that we will be using. We also have provided in this document, if you do not have, and you have not been vaccinated, you need to contact your hospital, the pharmacies, the health department, and other vaccination providers. Also, we have put in the document, if you have lost your card, you need to provide, reach out to the necessary groups that I just mentioned to get your card and get your status. So this is our information that has already gone out. Prior to, we sent this out about 5:30. We already have 76 people that have already completed the process via our Google Forms. So we are very excited about this process that we are utilizing to help gain this information from our staff. Are there any questions?
So now that there's full FDA approval, is that correct that we're moving forward with requiring vaccination for staff?
Not necessarily, unless you tell us this evening we are. The motion that we had at the last board meeting said when vaccines were approved by the FDA and when we gave the 30-day notice. Certainly today is big news. The Pfizer vaccine was approved as an option and is available. If the board so moves, then we can certainly move forward with the 30-day requirement and give such notice to employees. Our thoughts when we were talking about vaccines was that more than one vaccine being available, because there may be options or reasons one person couldn't take one vaccine, but they would be eligible to take another. But it's certainly that is the board's choice. But the motion did have vaccines plural, and the vaccines were available by the FDA. So happy to clarify or ask, because I know since that announcement was made, some people are already reporting that our 30-day notice had started, and so we have not given the 30-day notice yet. That's a great question.
To me, I heard the spirit of our motion as being we have a fully FDA-approved vaccine, and I would interpret that as, to start the 30 days. That would be what I would vote for.
That's certainly my understanding. Other board members? Ms. Smiley? Might as well. And I haven't heard any reasons, medical reasons, that someone would be able to take one vaccine but not another. But certainly, if there's a board member who requests that and can provide, some medical documentation, that's fine for me. I just have not been familiar with that.
I would assume that would be a medical exception. If you can't take the vaccine, I would assume that would be something we would consider. Correct?
Yes.
What we're hearing is clarified based on the motion that was made was this vaccine that's been approved today would start the investigation and the process for staff immediately.
Hauser?
Are we doing anything before we slam the hammer? Are we doing anything to encourage or incent people to get vaccinated before we tell them they have to be vaccinated? So we offer financial incentives, time off, anything to...
Education with Dr. Benjamin to answer questions or fears they may have.
We just been talking about it.
Well, we have certainly begun having those kinds of conversations and exploring some options. But at the moment, no, we don't have, other than clinics and providing folks with information about where they can go to obtain the vaccine.
We give them a day off for a side effect. If you take the vaccine, you get the day off.
That's certainly something we can consider. We've not done that previously. Ms. Smiley? I would love to see us take some steps to address anybody who has vaccine hesitancy. And I think that what a lot of people have seen is that it's one-on-one conversations, perhaps with your own healthcare provider. So there's limits to what we can do, but the more we can set up those opportunities for them I would really like to see us do that. That's out there.
And just, and if we could also make it convenient, so maybe have, I think we have do we have a clinic at Cedar Ridge High School, vaccination clinic?
We had, yes, we had.
Right, so we could do some of that too, then schedule sometimes to do vaccines on site.
Right.
So my question's a little off of the vaccine part. So our subs that we have in the district, such as our cleaning services or Boomerang or EC transportation that we have, what are we requiring upon them, and what do we actually have in place for them to follow? For example, the cleaning services are in our buildings physically. The EC driving transportation service, from my understanding, is they're providing transportation for our students. Boomerang would be another case where if we engage them, we would have students in their facility. What are we sharing with them as requirements as part of that wouldn't have been in the original contract?
So we have not shared anything outside of our contracted providers that are providing services in the school building for students, such as our occupational folks or speech language or other individuals that are contracted to provide specific services to students, direct contact with them face-to-face in our buildings. Boomerang, we would certainly need to look at their original contract, in terms of that contract, and speak with the attorney about the contract parameters, and the same with any of our other providers if the board is requesting that any individual that comes onto campus. Most of our contract cleaning, except for 3 schools, I believe there's still 3 schools is all day too. That would be a different, possibly a different case than the ones who are coming in like at this time of night, the building's clear, they're coming in and performing cleaning. So we need to look at the terms of the contract and then talk about any additional requirements or restrictions on them. And we can separate that by those that are providing services during the school day or out of school. I do get concerned if we're talking about construction or other projects, because I do think that could raise the prices tremendously if we put additional requirements on individuals.
Yeah, I was thinking more of the students. The one that really comes to my mind is we had hired a EC transportation services that was a third party, and they would be in direct contact with students. And are we even requiring them to have masks, right, during the transportation process? So that would be okay. I want to make sure that that's true. So.
Right, I was trying to jump in, and I didn't. So, Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we extend until 9:45.
But we have to finish the meeting and go into closed
Right, so
session.
this is the meeting.
But the motion would be until adjournment.
So, all right, we'll do that. Well, let's say till adjournment, because we'll stay here.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, I have a motion for Ms. Stevens, second for Mr. Anderson, Ms. Doyle. Yes. Towser.
Yes.
I vote yes. Dr. Moore.
Yes.
Ms. Smiley. Yes. Ms. Stevens.
Yes.
Mr. Atkinson.
Yes.
We're in session indefinitely.
Yes.
So that pleases the board. We'll speak with the attorney, and we'll talk about different types of contracts and services and bring that back to you when we bring the next update in September.
Yeah, just to pull that thread a little more, because we know that, we're only as strong as our weakest point into the schools. We have food deliveries that come, we have people that drop off things. Are we requiring all of them and ensuring that they are masked, that when they enter the building, they will be masked? Or, regardless, if they're in our buildings, I just want to confirm that, because there's lots of these additional areas.
Yeah,
I don't think that's ever on the table if they're in our building. Or certainly should.
I prefer to ask.
Not in.
Yeah, I prefer to ask.
I was just going to mention with the student testing, we're still working with the provider. We are, again, doing some testing more in September, and I won't say the date yet because I don't know we have it confirmed, but there'll be another one coming up at Orange High, so we're making sure we're making, and that one's on a weekend. So again, as we provide night, we provide weekend, other opportunities for students or families to get vaccinated. I think that was it I had on this, unless you had any more questions.
Any other questions, thoughts, comments? Okay, Ms. Smiley? Just a quick, I mean, I just really appreciate your level of thoroughness and attention to detail and logic in this process, and figuring out how to make things happen. So very excited to see all of these different measures we're putting in place.
That's it.
Yeah, I echo that. Really, maybe Mr. Abilene, thanks, Dr. Feller, and all staff that are contributing to the safety of our students and staff members. Okay, well, the last update for tonight is with regards to keeping students learning in situations where they have to be quarantined. So with that, Dr. Feller.
And yes, I too am very appreciative of Mr. Abilene and all that he brings to Orange County Schools. Thank you, Mr. Abilene. As Dr. Benjamin has been known to share with us and inform us, that it's not about, we're going to have cases of COVID, but it's about the extremeness, right, that we're trying to prevent. And so one thing that we do know is that should a case happen, when a case happens, that quarantine will be necessary. And we've identified that there are several different scenarios that could happen. And in these scenarios, we wanted to make sure that we're continuing to provide quality teaching and learning for our students and staff, regardless if they're quarantined or not. And so tonight, we would like to just share with you these scenarios and what that instructional model will look like. So if a student or a group of students must quarantine, and I think, before I start, I should probably note that there are some practices that we need to maintain because it's just good practice. And our teachers have done an excellent job last year really harnessing the blended learning and teaching model. And so we really are encouraging all of our teachers to continue that practice. And as we were going through, and visiting classrooms today, especially at Hillsborough Elementary, where they've been in session for a while, it was quite nice to be able to kind of peek in windows and see the kids actually with their devices and with their teachers and engaged in discourse in that blended model. So, we're asking our teachers to continue the best practices of that, and by doing so, it will also, should we have to pivot to a quarantine scenario, allow for continuous teaching and learning to go on. So should a student or students be quarantined, the students will continue to access their work through the online platforms such as Canvas. Some of our teachers for our younger grades, they prefer Google Classroom because it's a little bit more user-friendly for the younger grades. And of course, especially like our kindergarten students, we know that our teachers use Seesaw a lot. So continuing to use those tools as regular instruction, even outside of being quarantined, we can make a quick pivot. And students, are they, healthy enough to be able to still log on? They can log on and continue their work. The one thing, and how we came up with this information was not in isolation. We did, of course, listen to feedback sessions from our teachers last year as to what was working for them and what was not working for them. And then this year, pulling together a team across the district, as well as our classroom teachers, our coaches at the school level, at our district level, our principals, and brought them together under the leadership of Dr. Doyle. We really appreciated her creating that space to, again, another feedback session to say what worked, what didn't work. And this is based on a lot of their feedback. And so, one of the things that we know was a very difficult challenge last year was having teachers to teach this kind of terminology kind of went national, like our roomies and our zoomies, right, at the same time. Kids who are in person and kids who are remote, and for teachers to try to teach them at the same time, it's very challenging, and with, not maybe the best optimal scenario for our students or our teachers. And so that's something that we're going to try to avoid this year. But again, it's like we're going to do everything we can to avoid it, but we don't know the circumstances that may change. And so it may, get to that, but that's something we're trying to avoid. So we just want to be flexible, not knowing where this may lead. But there may be opportunities in a classroom because creative last year. They swiveled, they set up cameras, and we're also looking at additional technology to support where a student can remote into a class to watch the class. So I'm here presenting to you, and a student could actually, just like Ms. Moore is zooming in, she can see us, but I'm not, as a teacher, necessarily having to like teach Ms. Moore, right, where I'm trying to do the roomies and the zoomies at the same time, but the student can listen to the instructions that the teacher is giving, can hear the peers giving, you know, the answers, that kind of discourse, so they can still have a certain level of engagement without the teacher having to try to do both. So that's something that is, you know, we're making available for our students should they have to quarantine. And of course, in any scenario, our students who are required to have court services, they will continue to have those services. The way that they're delivered those services may be different, much more similar to what they were last year, but we have an obligation to provide those services, and we will continue to do so. We will have a situation possibly where a teacher might have to quarantine. And so in this scenario, again, the teacher continuing to use the online platform for posting assignments, putting up, you know, different lessons. This is where we are taking a look at if the teacher is well enough, because as we know, just because, you know, you have COVID, I mean, there's a whole range, and sometimes you're not well enough to attend as a student or teach as a teacher. But if the teacher is able, but they just need to be quarantined because they don't have COVID, but maybe a close contact, this is where the teacher would zoom in. So I could be in there, I could maybe be a coach that's co-teaching with the teacher who may be remote, and I'm here, and they can be co-teaching. Or, you know, I could be the substitute teacher that was brought in to cover while the teacher is teaching remotely from home. So those are different scenarios that we have where the continuing teaching and learning going on. Another, of course, you know, based upon guidance from our Orange County Health Department in collaboration with school nurse, if there is a situation where there's a possible cluster or there's evidence of, you know, I want to say 5 or more cases, this could be a whole class, right, that might have to quarantine. And so in this kind of situation, we would connect more to the model that we did last year in the sense that the teacher would be teaching remotely, the students would be attending remotely. And then, of course, if, you know, again, by the guidance of the Orange County Health Department, and as we know, they look at a variety of metrics to determine, but it may be that a whole school must quarantine. And that, again, going back similar to last year, where the teachers and students would be teaching remotely. Now, we do want to say that based upon the circumstance, because, of course, each scenario is unique, that if we're able to, we are going to ask our teachers to be teaching from the classroom versus all being remote if that situation is safe and allows for it. You know, that allows the teachers to have their equipment that they need. They don't have to try to worry about shipping, you know, everything from their classroom to their home and have to try to set up home offices and in classrooms. They could still continue to come as long as it's safe. And, you know, that, again, will be based on each circumstance. And, you know, we just want to be clear that these are options that we'd be taking a look at based upon the quarantine scenario. But we are following the guidelines of legislation in the state in that we are to be back in person. This is not remote learning. These are scenarios to address circumstances that we may have to face based upon the quarantine that may be required for the different scenarios we shared with you tonight. Online Academy is our 14th standalone school. Online Academy is not a remote option. So families have to understand that if they're interested in a virtual school because that may be the best interest for their child, again, they would have to go through the process like any other school to register to attend that school. And as we shared earlier tonight, it is capped and there is a wait list. So I just want to be clear because I know that we've been receiving phone calls and we've also been receiving phone calls from parents, not many, but you know, parents asking questions, what are their options? So I just wanted to clarify. Online Academy is our 14th school and not a remote option. So just want to, I'm trying to close out here. There are expectations, of course, when we're quarantining, certain things that we will need our students to do, and certain things that our parents will do, and certain things that our staff will do. We've all been very great. Like, we've been doing this over a year now, and each person and each role in the district has been doing a phenomenal job under these circumstances. And so we just want to remind our students that, continue to bring your devices back and forth, fully charged, so that you can use them in that blended model in the classroom. And should something happen and you later find out that you are to be isolated or quarantined, that they have their device at home. And of course, whenever possible, that they should remote in into live classes and be active participants in their classes, even if they're having to quarantine. And that to know that there may be some lessons or sections of their lesson, as in any blended model of instruction, that there is going to be parts that will be synchronous or asynchronous, pre-recorded lessons and such to help with their learning. Now, this is a little bit of a change. And this was something, too, that was feedback from our teachers saying, when students are Zooming in or are remoting in, it's very, very helpful to have the camera on. It was very difficult for teachers to try to engage and to read the students, to try to figure out, are they understanding, not understanding? And so this is a little bit of a change, because last year we didn't require that cameras have to be on. This year we're asking students, please turn on your cameras so that the teachers can better read you, read the aspect of, are you understanding, not understanding, and to be able to assist you more. So, and of course, regular attendance, as long as you are healthy to do so, even though you're in quarantine. And then, of course, to complete assignments and such. So, and then parents just supporting to make sure that there's that environment where students can attend class. And then, just reviewing specifics and just communicating with the teacher and, making sure that students are submitting their lessons and actively engaging. Now, on the staff side, because we have a much longer list for what staff will do, we didn't include all of it. So this is just a quick summary of some of the key things that staff will do. And again, making their classrooms available and setting up the structure of the classes so that students will be able to access classes by remoting in or being able to go online and see that, oh, here's some lessons that my teacher has made available to me. Well, I know where my assignment is. Here, I can turn it in. So, and making sure that that they too are actively engaging with the student as well, and not just someone that are in front of them. So, and all good practice, right? Continue to communicate with family, and all of that will continue regardless if anyone is quarantined through this ordinance to happen. So that's just, again, a summary of the list. Yes. Sorry,
No, thank you for all that. One question I had, I know we had some good reasons for allowing students to leave their cameras off last year. I wonder if we are requiring that, are we providing some, is there a background available in every platform that we might ask a student to turn a camera on in?
There is a background capability, and so I will double check to see, because I know Zoom has also changed, and so has Google Meet has also changed some of their capabilities. So that's something that we'll follow up to ensure. Right? And our teachers have been very good about, if the student has the camera off, they're saying, okay, when you're asked a question, right, or when they're participating, to please turn it on. So they've been accommodating based on their relationship with the student and knowing the student's circumstances. But one thing that for sure that I can follow up on is the background to ensure that there is something that is this, can we set one, or can a student set one?
And also, sometimes it's a bandwidth issue, and I just wonder if we are allowing for that flexibility with that, because I know sometimes you're compromising sound for
that's very true.
The visual. So I'm just wondering if there's flexibility there. It sounds like there is.
A great point, and we'll definitely include that.
Thank you. Thanks.
Other questions, comments?
Riley?
I have a couple of thoughts, and thank you so much for this thorough presentation. A couple of thoughts and then a question. So one is, in terms of quarantine teachers and that option, I would hope that we are maximizing the use of subs rather than coaches because of the importance Another is, it sounds like we would wait until there was a cluster in a classroom to quarantine the whole class, which is 5 cases in one class. I think there might be a sign of a need to isolate a class sooner than identify cases. So I would maybe go back to the health department and talk to them about that.
All of that would be with the direction of the Orange County Health Department.
Yeah, that sounds like things might be pretty far along with these cases. And then my question is, I have sort of like particular reactions to particular pieces of this. I think it's thoughtful. I'm wondering who is going to, in terms of the enabling students to continue to make progress and learn while quarantined, which could be a big issue in the district this year, who is going to be evaluating how effective our plan is and figuring out what needs to change or not? So who's sort of in charge of evaluating that?
So of course, curriculum and instruction in collaboration with our classroom teachers and school teams, we together will be continuing to monitor should this scenario happen, what's working, what's not. Just like even before coming to pull this together, it was, hey teachers, hey coaches, you guys lived this in the front line. What worked, what didn't. And then, like we said before, this year, much more than last year, we'll be going much deeper into our data analysis. We'll be looking at, the data of how are our students doing, how are the students who are having to quarantine doing compared to those who are not. And this is what was so great about having this tentative start the year for us, right? Because by looking at our data, we're going to see what's working and what's not, and asking the question, hey, it's working for you. What are you doing? Because it's not as strong over here, and then learning from best practices of our colleagues to be able to scale what's working.
Thank you. I hope that we'll do that sort of on a rapid cycle, right? Rather than waiting for those big assessment points.
Yeah.
And I also hope, I think there's an opportunity to speak to some of the parents about what did and didn't work, so that because we have less of a view into what happened.
So how is absenteeism going to be tracked? I think about some of the technology issues, and last year we had requirements of check-in once, and then when I think of outside the elementary and more the high school, you have many, many teachers, and have we set up a protocol on how that would be managed and how parents can confirm, they've done what they should?
So it's very similar to last year. The state actually has given us some guidance around how attendance should be taken. And so, of course, we'll follow that as our main guidance. And this is, again, where we say, students, please do your part, parents do your part, and then staff, we do our part, and staff will be checking in. And then, creating opportunity, even though I'm teaching all day, and, I might not be engaging with the students, but at the school level, knowing, hey, if we have a situation, what's our system in place to ensure that we're having that in-person connection with the students on a regular basis, daily, right? To number one, make sure that the students were able to get access if they need any support with the work that they have, but also then that in part helps with the attendance as well.
Yeah, I hope we get to where each school has quarantine tab and then click on it, and this is what they should expect, right? Absenteeism, how to get in contact, notify your teacher, whatever the steps are, because, when people do run into this, they weren't expecting it, and they're going to be searching for this and trying to figure it out, and I think each school saying, call your office or whatever, or just an easy way for parents to know, here's what I need to do, or high school students, here's what I need to do, versus trying to figure it out.
I just want to thank you. This is a huge goal for me, and just thank you for filling it. I'm sure you're evolving it, but just thank you for sending our this. And I'll definitely share that gratitude with the whole team, because of course this was not one person. It was many, many people that came together to make this happen. So on behalf of all of the team, thank you very much. And this is a greater.
Anything else? Any other discussions? Okay, thank you so much, Dr.
Thank you so much.
Really appreciate it.
And I'm going to pass it over to the potential chair of that committee, Mrs. Terry Doyle, so she can walk us through kind of what that might look like should we choose to approve that committee this evening.
Okay. Thank you, Chair McKenzie. So I spent some time thinking about what this committee would look like since we would need to move away from the monthly meeting schedule in the morning like we did this past year because we don't have the staff capacity since we're bringing back Recruitment Achievement Committee. And so thinking of how we could do this every other month, it would be having, like, for example, September a month where we meet as a committee in the morning, and then October we wouldn't during the workday, but we would use some of that time in the month of September to plan going out into the community event. Space would be a listening session for the board, which is something we're all trying to do more of and have sort of built into what we do as board members. So it would be an alternating month schedule is what I'm thinking. And so in the monthly meeting time, like for example in September, that would include continuing some of what we did last year, like starting off with equity training and kind of building our listening skills and capacity with Dr. Keeling. We have some ongoing community engagement work to keep up with, both with our Flamboyant Fellowship group, and that work is continuing, that fellowship is continuing through this year. It's our second year. We're entering our second year. So there are some pieces that we want to follow along community engagement from that. And also some aspects of community engagement are built into our strategic plan goals. So we would want to hear how we're doing as a district, how we're doing as a board, meeting our goals in the strategic plan and community engagement. And then we would also use some of that meeting time to decide where do we need to go. You know, do we need to plan a location where we're organizing reverse translation so that we're listening to members of the community in their primary language and we're having translation for the board? Do we want to go hear like a student forum, which was an idea that came to community engagement last year from one of our district students? And then just maintaining things like our virtual office hours and things like that. And so some of the other things that came to community engagement last year, I think, have kind of spun out. And so, for example, we talked about how to have an advisory group for our EC families. That was one of our topics last year. That's kind of spun out and is now in process. And Mr. Ashton and I have had some communication around bringing CTE topics that came to community engagement to our full board meeting. And then we also really kind of capitalized on what we learned from the Stewart and have some items to bring forward. So some things have kind of come to community engagement and gone to other directions at this point. So the main idea would be to have a schedule for creating community listening spaces where we're not doing it here, but we're going other places.
And we would take the idea that Carrie and I kind of bounced around. Was that, you know, the other committees would only have to give us like maybe probably just one committee time in the morning throughout the year. When, you know, the chairs can work together to determine that, but that way we're not taking up too much staff time with it, but we have some structure for continuing our work and becoming a board that is well engaged with the community. So I guess we'll start with that, and then we move into topics of interest after we get through this conversation. What does everybody think?
I love this idea. I love the idea of alternating it with the evening to do some actual engaging of the community. And it does, I mean, this goal for cultivate supportive partnerships among families, schools, and community stakeholders, I mean, I really like the idea of linking it to the strategic plan and then alternating some actual engagement.
I really like that alternating the evenings is more inclusive, because when you do it during the day, we know who we're leaving out. Because there are people, everybody, you're not all housewives or retired or whatever, you know what I mean? So I thank you for that. And I think I like all of your ideas, and I like going out, because one concern that I had was, just meeting in the morning all the time online. And you didn't capture all of the community. And if we do it in the evenings, and if we do it, different times, perhaps we could include more people in the community. So we could, capture more people that look like me. Thank you.
Other board members? Thoughts?
So could you explain a little more about how the other committees would give up their time? I mean, just because, yeah, I'm not following that part. So.
The idea is that, like, the budget committee might give up one morning spot to community engagement, so there can be morning planning time and a morning meeting. And then 2 months later, student achievement might give up one meeting. And then 2 months later, a month later, 2 months later, we'll have to work it out, but I think it's not insurmountable.
Let me ask it differently, because I'm not communicating that, I guess. So the purpose of doing that is for staff. So in other words, I'm making it up. So October, Budget Committee says, we're going to skip that. Then the Engagement Committee would have that spot, and so committee would know they need to focus engagement on that versus the budget.
The idea is we have 3 committee meeting slots from 9 to 12 on whatever morning, just 3 a month. That's the idea, preserving that. And then if we as a board choose to have some evening thing at a school or at a community center or whatever, it would still be noticed, but it wouldn't be something run by staff. It would just be something where we are in the community, but it has to be listed because we would all be there.
Right, but if it was at a school, that would require staff. I'm saying, I'm not.
The idea is not to.
I'm saying, yes.
Right, yeah.
I'm not going to do that. That makes sense.
Yeah, so the idea is that because this would be the only ad hoc committee, that the other ones would have more regular time during the workday with staff. And, and it may be that we plan 2 things so that we skip 2 months and budget doesn't have to give up October or whatever. But yeah, in general, that this meeting wouldn't always be happening in a weekday morning, which would be Stephanie.
So just for clarity, I'm catching up, so I appreciate it. So the night one would be once a month as well, alternating, or it would be there would be one per month that would be during the day and a night one during that month, or trying to determine.
It would be at least the night ones would be at least every other month.
Every other month.
Yeah. So they would, and if we end up being able to, create and serve at 2 evening ones, great. But the idea is that they would largely alternate.
And I think we would still require some staff for translation, for example.
Which we could do, yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you. I'm caught up to what the proposal is. I just didn't connect how that would physically work.
I am a huge fan of community listening spaces. I think that's really important to do, really hard to do, and it's really dynamic. So that, if we're doing it correctly, we're going to do it in their space, on their convenience, not at ours. So I just think we need to be ready for that. The only thing I'm a little bit wondering about is the equity training for a subset of the board. And is that worth tying up our staff to do, right? Because, remember that a lot of that happened in the community engagement last year. Why would we going to do that? Why are we doing it for everybody? So it's just a question. And in the interest of putting less of a burden on us.
And we can get some feedback from Dr. Felder and Dr. Sealing on that.
I mean, that the parameters of the committee can always be noodled with the committee as it gets put together, too. So, and Dr. Feller, of course, would know.
I fully support that. So just know that staff want to be supportive in any way that we can, but I think what's being proposed recognizes, capacity limits and such. And so I think it's a happy medium that allows the work to move forward, but also recognizes that, we also don't want to overly tax staff. So, keep it out the door to see if Dr. Killing has. She's there. Just wondering if you had any thoughts. Were you able to hear what we were discussing? Okay. So the idea is that our ad hoc committee and community engagement would have an alternating pattern with, what we did last year with kind of a weekday morning and evening events that are more out in the community. And part of my description included that we would still be getting some guidelines from you on like best listening practices when we are doing this community engagement work. Even if in the morning time we might not have all of our board members there to receive that information from you.
So our student still is great. Like that's one of the things that I brag about. So when people are asking me what we're doing in the district, is that I say that we have the training with the board, that the board sets time aside to do that. I think it also sets us apart from other districts that it shows their commitment and that you're engaging in monthly or every other month training and reflection. So, I'm for it, and you just tell me where to be and I'll be there.
Any other questions or discussions before we move into that?
So the only other one is on the snack committee. I had requested to be included on that. Is that still a possibility?
Yeah, of course. I told you were doing your
Yeah, I just didn't know.
Yeah. I mean, this isn't when I was necessarily going to read out every single liaison. I figured that would be posted, and I said that if we didn't do that, then the committee arrangements we might have to rebalance the work basically because it'd be 3 instead of 4. So absolutely, you can do that.
Yeah, I saw that this was action, which means we would approve them, and I just wanted to make sure.
Well, we don't approve. I mean, respectfully, the board doesn't approve the chair assignment. It's just approving the committee.
Right.
So it would just be voting on, are we having community engagement ad hoc committee for this year? That's the only thing we are voting on.
The other 3 committees are established in house.
Yeah.
But yes, I'm happy to accommodate.
Okay, thank you.
So are we looking for a motion to approve that ad hoc committee for this year for community engagement?
Second.
Motion from Ms. Smiley, second from Ms. Stevens. Mr. Atherton?
Yes.
Ms. Doyle? Yes. Chair Doyle? Ms. Hauser? Yes. I vote yes. Dr. Moore? Yes. Ms. Smiley? Yes. Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Okey-doke. Then we have that set for the year, and we will post those assignments very soon. The next thing we'll do is just quickly go around and folks can share any specific agenda items or topics of interest for this year for future agendas. Vice Chair Stevens, do you have anything you'd like to share?
None of that I'd like to share at this point. I can always share it when we at an agenda review.
Okay, Mr. Atherton.
So I just jotted down a few things. One, of course, the student achievement. Would like to see us bring in more of the school programs that we have looked at in the past. I mean, we looked at first responders, the art programs where we had interns and things like that to really inform us and community.
Okay, what's happening?
One of the things that we talked about a while back is early childhood readiness, some of our pre-K work, what we're looking at. Would like to follow up on AIG once we get all the staff in place. Career and technical education programs, intern opportunities, community partnerships, facilities retreat on strategy and planning. We've got a lot of changes we've had in the district. We've talked about partnership. When partnership moves, we've got Stony Lane out there, so just going through all of that. Safety and security beyond COVID. What are we doing to protect. I know some of this will be closed session. We have a partner. I would like to.
We do have that every fall that comes to us.
Right. This is just the list.
Sure. Yeah. Would you mind emailing this to me?
Yes, I'll email it to everybody. So you don't need to write this. Somebody needs to write this down. It's important to. SNAC, of course, seeing that progress. The other one I put on there is focusing on some of the transparency. We talked about, our notification system for the community to sign up and really getting that going so people don't have to check our website, but they'll get notified. And that could be, and I want to be clear, this isn't about the kids and the parents that go to our schools. These are people in the community that may want to know, hey, there's a school closing, or hey, we have incremental weather, or hey, there is a meeting and they're a grandparent or something and they've signed up to get notified. I'd really like to see us try to get that in place this year. It's been one that's been out there, but we haven't been able to eat it yet. So.
I promise I'll put it on the near agenda.
All right, thank you. That's it for me, and I'll email this out.
Thank you very much. Ms. Smiley.
Just a few things for me. One is generally, I would love to see us focus on the 4 goals of the strategic plan and really orient around that and have some clear goals for progress we hope to make this year and be able to ground in that and see how we do later. I would like us to spend lots more time on student achievement. Again, understand, clear checkpoints on how things are going, including, updates particularly on our literacy efforts and any pivots we're making there to be more aligned to the science of reading. I think Ms. Hauser maybe mentioned earlier the equity audit and really understanding what was found with that. I have, especial interest for the budget committee in looking at equitable resource allocation, especially in budgeting time. And then I would really, every time we have students in, I really appreciate it. I think it's really grounding for us. And I would love hearing from more students, with purpose, not just like, let's do that because the board asked for it, but with purpose, hearing from students. Thank you.
I'm going to almost repeat what Sarah just said. I'd like to see us really anchor our conversations in progress on student outcomes disparities, service levels, and at a school level of detail, because the district level is not really actionable. The schools are where that's where the difference is occurring, that's where things are happening. I'd also like to see us in that context take a closer look at teacher retention and development, including how that affects student achievement. I would like, by the way, it's our policy now to see a hard shift to equity-based funding, again, at a school level, and that assuring our Title I schools and marginalized populations are getting the resources they need, but not taking those away from our high-performing groups. So I want to make sure we're focusing on equity and excellence together. And finally, I use a different term. I call it a mission moment, but I'd almost love to see us commit to open every board meeting with our schools, not us telling us what we like about our schools, but to give our schools the first 5 or 10 minutes of the meeting and just show us. Like I love the pre-K program that was done at Pathways with the first responders. That would be a great one. But something, and it's also a great time if the schools want to come in and tell us about a problem that they need our support on. But it would be their time, their agenda, and they can rotate it. But I'd love to hear more from them and remind us all always why we're here.
Thank you. Dr. Moore, did you have any topics of interest that you'd like to share tonight? Dr. Moore? Well, I'm going to pass it to you, Ms. Doyle. Thank you. Okay. Well, I'm going to keep mine short. A lot of mine is focused on community engagement. I would like to bring our perspective on community engagement to student gains and academics and how to bring those questions to our community. And I also feel like we're in such a moment where, as we talked about tonight, our student gains and our classroom needs are so closely tied with how we're responding in this moment of health. And so I'd love for us to hear recognition of healthcare or health measure warriors, like we have equity warriors, because the work that our school nurses are doing is so critical, and coaches and people who are just giving full-throated support of our health and safety measures. We really need that that advocacy work, and I'd love to spotlight who's doing that really well and hear about those stories.
Thank you. So many of the things on my list have already been shared, but I'll share them anyway. Literacy and core instruction, I think, is a priority for all of us in every year, but particularly after COVID. Completing the strategic plan and aligning our district around it feels incredibly important and grounding for all of us. Advocating for our capital needs with the county commissioners, which I think we'll have an opportunity to do with Commissioner Hamilton's group. We want to see us catch up on our policy backlog. And this is a very specific thing, but I would like to see us increase our access to the choice programs in this district and give priority to families who chose to leave those programs for virtual learning some kind of weight if they choose to reapply in the coming year, because I think that that is potentially something that could be very disruptive for a family, and something I'd like to consult with Eva around with that in a future time. So those are the things on my list. Is there anything else anyone wants to discuss or share? Well, I will just ask to please email me your thoughts, and I will do my best to get them on agenda. So with that,
just one question. One of the things we talked about at the retreat was putting together kind of a calendar of here are normal things that happen. And I mean, although it's not on my list, if you will, but I think that's very helpful for all of us as we go through the year on certain things that come up and we should be focused on. And would love, you know, Dr. Feller, if you put some thought around that we could get kind of that high level, here are key things, right? Whether it's
like a district calendar.
Exactly. Yeah. For the board of areas that we need, that we're going to focus on, budget, you know, grades, you know, all of the safety, whatever is.
Oh, you mean a calendar for topics of interest?
Well, the district has to do, there are certain things we have to do every year, like Title I.
Oh,
Title I's coming up.
Right.
So
okay, I'm with you now. I'm sorry. My mind was...
That's why I wanted to give more examples of it, because
I got it.
I think it helps all of us know the topics, because there's several things I didn't put on there because I know we just covered them throughout the year.
It's kind of like a long list. I think you know this to give them, like every August you do this, every December you do this.
Right, exactly.
So those of you who've been the chair of the vice chair, you know there's a long list, and there's a date for everything that you must do.
Yeah. All right. Well, I really appreciate everyone's thoughts, and I'm happy to consult with any of you to discuss it more, but look forward to doing some good work together this year. Dr. Felder, do you have anything else before we move back into closed session? I do not. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone, for bearing with us during our issues at the beginning of the meeting, and really appreciate all the work here done tonight. And with that, I will take a motion to go back into closed session.
Can we take a 2-minute break before we go back into closed?
We will move into closed session, but then I'll call a recess. Okay. So if you need to go, feel free.
Second.
I have a motion from Ms. Smiley and a second from Ms. Stevens. Mr. Atherton?
Yes.
Ms. Doyle? Yes. Ms. Hauser? Yes. I know, yes. Dr. Moore?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Smiley? Yes. Ms. Stevens? Yes. Okay, on that one. Okay. Then we are in closed session, and we will take a 5-minute recess.
It's over 20, so
before we get on everybody.
Yeah, here we go.
Mr. Obley?
It's off.
The light is off.
But this is still on. Yeah, this is still on.
All right, let's hold on a moment.
Do I have a motion to approve the revised personnel report? So moved. Favor? Aye. Opposed? As personnel passes unanimously. President, start for any minute. Do I have a motion to approve recruitment bonus as discussed for nurses? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Passes. Thank you. And I think with that, I will take a motion to adjourn. So moved. Second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
We sit here tonight and make a recommendation. All right, so 11:19, we have adjourned in the midnight. So we will.